You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 566, our breakdown of Choice, the 7th episode of the Acolyte series, and an episode that finally gave us answers. Not all the answers, but it gave us answers, and thankfully, we can now put two and two together, put some stuff together, put the puzzle together. We kind of get the more holistic picture of really what happened 16 years ago on Brenock. And it was a good episode. I enjoyed it. But more into what I liked and didn't like in just a minute. And with me to do all of that, of course, is Jonesy. Jonesy, welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight?
You know, it's been a wild week. Just to put it out there. It's been a crazy week. Yeah, thanks for everyone for the patience on the Patreon show, rescheduling, things like that. For those that maybe not as familiar with what's going on in the Gulf Coast, we had a hurricane. So when it came right up over where I live. So yeah, we've been kind of dealing with that for the last few days, but things are slowly getting back to normal down here. But other than that, doing pretty well. Count our blessings, right?
Yeah. No, and thanks everybody for sticking it out. No pun intended, at least on us having to reshuffle some things and reschedule some things. So for Patreon members, just as a reminder, we are committed to giving you guys the Patreon show that we weren't able to do on Sunday, but we'll talk about more on that here as the week progresses.
Yeah. And speaking of Patreon, thank you to all of our amazing Patreon members, including our recently upgraded member of the part of the tribe is Alex. And the rest of the now part of the tribe is Raphael, Danny, Mike, Lauren, Dante, Riss, Justin, Jackson, Sharkman, and Daz, Isabella, Uncle Leon, Josh, Jacob, and Rita Reborn. And of course, our Delusion of Grandeur members. Now this is Rod Racing, CJ, Steve, and Daz. Thank you all so much for all of your continued support of the show. CantinaCast.com/Patreon if you're interested in joining one of our tiers. We'd love to have you. We have something for everybody, from audio to video to a chance to join the show or join us on a show for now. What is it? From a certain point of view, man, it feels like we haven't done this in a while. Yeah, but we'd love for the opportunity to talk Star Wars with y'all, and it's a lot of fun. So thanks for everyone for the support, and we hope to see you there. And if you're listening to this, thanks for download. CantinaCast.com/YouTube if you'd like to join us on a live stream sometime. Like these amazing people in the chat so far: Steve, Alex, Steph, Alex, not Steve, Sky, J-Dub, One versus CPU, Danny, K. It's going to be one of those nights, I think, where I cannot talk.
Yeah. Welcome to the club. Glad you're here. Yeah. And if you guys have questions tonight, feel free to throw them in there. We'll get to the questions as we can. If not, we'll try to table them and come back and do them as part of a Q&A show. And speaking of questions, we've been given a poster, an Acolyte poster official posters. I'll grab it here in just a second. And we've got an announcement to make as far as our winner from last week's questions. And Jonesy, I think you've got the winner.
Yeah, we sure do. Adam Jung, thank you so much for your questions. You are the winner of the poster this week. Albert holding it up. The last one that we have, but...
No, we got one more.
You have one more poster?
I've got one more poster. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then we'll do the finale.
Yeah, we're going to do something special, right? Yeah.
Yeah, right. Because the poster we'll do next time will be for this week's episode that just came out for Choice.
Oh, that's right.
And then we do the finale.
Always a week in arrears, man.
Always we're in arrears. I know. It's really hard to think of. Do you want to announce what we're giving away for the finale?
Yeah, you have it there with you? By chance?
Somewhere.
Yeah, so for maybe those that are new with us, Albert and I really enjoy the art of books that come out. There's been a number of these throughout the years. And recently, I believe it was it last year or earlier this year, Art of the High Republic came out. And these are gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous books that give you all sorts of concept art, never before seen art or art that you'd have to dig around for. And Albert's showing it here on the live stream. And in some of the covers that you have from comic books, some of the sketches, it's amazing work. And these are really high quality books. This is a hardcover book, glorious cover. It's got Markion Road there on the back, as well as Keith Trennis and company on the front. Absolutely spectacular. So Albert was kind enough to donate this for our Grain prize. Yeah, Kristen Baver did this one, which is really cool to see her name on so many of the books these days too. So this is it's really cool. So yeah, thanks for doing that, Albert. And this will be the grand prize that we will give away here in a couple weeks.
Yeah. So get your questions in, and I don't know, Jonesy, maybe we'll talk about it about how we pick the winner. But yeah, those will be for anybody that submits questions after the finale, episode 8. That'll make you eligible to win the Art of the High Republic book. Great book. Lots of fun to look and flip through the pages on that one. So, let's see. Okay, just quick programming notes. Sunday, we've got the Way Station coming up. I'll have Ed and Fred back on for that. And then afterwards, Jonesy and I will do a Patreon show focused mostly on the Q&A stuff, but we'll try to tease in a subject as well based on our conversation tonight and anything that comes up between now and Sunday. That'll be for Patreon members exclusively. Those shows have been going about an hour and a half long. And,
well, I imagine we'll have a lot of speculation about what the finale is going to look like too, right? So you'll want to tune into that one because we'll kind of give our last impressions and kind of revisit maybe some of the things we talked about before the series started and see if they're on track and what we can expect in the finale.
Yeah. Yep. So tune in for that on Sunday. And then next Sunday, I think Lauren and I are coming back to do Temptation of the Force, but don't hold me to that. I forget now where that is. It's coming up very soon.
Y'all still owe us High Republic comments, I believe. Yeah. Temptation of the Force.
By the way, speaking of Lauren, she's going to be with us on the finale breakdown. So next Wednesday, she'll be on that show with us. She's had to miss a couple of these, of course, for different reasons, but she'll be back on Wednesday to discuss that. So it'll be fun to have all three of us in there, and that'll probably be a 4-hour show or something at that point.
Yeah.
But, what's a couple hours?
Yeah. It's funny. Mike Rondo's like, I can't believe you guys are still doing 2 and 3 hour shows. Like, how do y'all do it?
Right. Yeah.
Like, well, that's our specialty.
That's what you taught us, right?
That's not. He would argue that one.
No, he did not.
That is not what I taught you guys.
He was trying to get out of here in like 30 minutes at most.
Right.
Okay, so with all that out of the way, let's get into talking about choice. And I guess right out of the gate, Jonesy, I'll start with you. Let's get your kind of opening thoughts, initial thoughts. How did you like the episode? And specifically, now that you've seen episode 3, episode 7, pairing those together, how did that, did it enhance the enjoyment of the third episode? Did it do anything for you more? What were your initial impressions here?
I think coupled with episode 3, it really didn't do much of anything for me in that regard. And I don't know that I mean it in a negative way, but it wasn't the other side of the coin. It wasn't Mae's perspective. This is really more the Jedi perspective. And we debated a little bit about would we get Mae and the Jedi or something like that. And we kind of thought we would probably get both or we get more Mae, but this one really skewed heavily towards the Jedi. So that was a little bit of a surprise. I think it makes sense to do it the way they did it. Their perspective probably aligns more with what we have from Mae's perspective in some ways because she was present for some of these activities. So it was a way to blend those together. So I think it worked okay in that regard. This was a little bit of an up and down episode. I think there were really good moments. I think, oddly enough, one of the things I took from this episode is that there's life lessons in this episode of one, what you hear is not always what is reality, right? So when we hear what Mae was saying about everybody has to be sacrificed, right. complete turn of words that just a slight misquote of what it is or misinterpretation of it can spark outrage, right? And it can spark a lot of extreme reaction and emotions and things like that drive us to make different decisions when you don't have enough information, as well as, of course, the lifelong lesson of being a Jedi, of letting your emotions continue to cloud your judgment, imprinting what you want on other people, and then viewing that that's actually what they want. Sometimes they align, sometimes they don't. So they're actually really good lessons in here. I was a little bit relieved as well that the Jedi weren't necessarily painted in a holistically negative way, and it was just more crapping all over the Jedi. I think you can actually realistically see here, yes, they were flawed in some of their judgment. Yes, Torbin was acting petulantly in many ways and very self-interested. But I think, like, we went into the series knowing that they aren't the villain and they were working from some bad information, and they get caught up and swept up in some of the emotional aspects of what they were seeing. And from Saul's perspective, he's seeing someone who's very rough with the kids, and that's just not how he believes things should work. So his own beliefs are coloring what he's seeing. So I think a lot of those help reconcile a little bit that we're not just dumping all over the Jedi yet again. Definitely made mistakes. Definitely not telling the truth to the council, but also you almost understand Andar's perspective. I think a little bit of that, like you're basically leaving the kid to be, I don't know, adrift effectively, I think was where she was coming from, and be completely alone because the Jedi wouldn't take her if Saul wasn't there to maybe advocate and fight for her directly. So, some of those concepts and things come through and you almost understand it, even if you don't have to agree with it though. And I think that's totally fine. I think that's totally justified. But I think in some of those ways, it really does work pretty well. Some things in the episode still don't really work, like electrical fire. Okay, we understand that a little bit better. Does it cause the whole place to go up? that seems a little bit extreme, but yeah, we'll go with it. It's Star Wars. We had fire in space, right? So you have to accept everything, I think, at this point. And I'm not saying that in a snide way. It's just the reality of space movies, I think, in general. But
Yeah.
so some of those things you just got to, kind of roll with. Love the Night Sisters tie-in and the way that the dark magics work when they were trying to wisp and things like that. I thought that was really cool. It was really great to see that. The imagery with Mother Anastasia doing it, I thought was really wild because it was almost like she was semi-demonic the way that she was transforming. But when you think about why she was doing it, is very altruistic, and it's sad the way that it all ended up. So
Yeah.
I'll kind of pause there. We'll get into a lot of that throughout the episode. Those are my initial thoughts of, the Jedi. You kind of understand why they were working from what they were working, even though you know that they're really not in the best place. And I think even from the Coven's perspective, they really do care about their own and want to protect their own. But again, they're not in the right here as much either, or not totally either, although they're ones being kind of invaded.
Yeah. So I enjoyed this episode. And I know I say that because I'm going to start with my negative first, and before I get into some of the more positive aspects of this episode. And I've been fighting all day. I told Jonesy I was tired earlier. It's like, it's just been rough, man. I've had more conversations and seen more pictures of metal detectors than I really care for ever in my life. Like, I think I've had my fill of metal detector conversations. But that aside, I wasn't the biggest fan of episode 3. Like I said, I was fine. I had ranked it as kind of like the third between 1 and 2 and 3. And when that aired, and then even after that, I took some grief from our own listeners as well. Fair grief as well. But I was still kind of like, it's always been at the bottom. And I think I've said this a couple times in the episode. I'm just not as interested in what happened in the past. Like, it's intriguing in the sense that I need to know it because it kind of fills out the rest of the story. Right. But I'm so much more invested in Kamir and the Acolyte and Osha and Mae flipping and all that. That is where my interest is 100%. Like, this was great that I got the background story, but usually I'm one of the people that feels like has a really bad case of FOMO. And with this one, it was like, okay, I now know what happened and I've got the answers, but kind of to your point, like, it didn't really change anything for me. Like, even having the more, even seeing the other perspective, if you will, of all of this didn't really change my liking of that episode any more than what I did before. Some of that is the writing. Some of that is the decisions that were made. Again, I'm not saying I hate it. I'm not sitting there. I'm not trashing the episode. But now that that's out of the way, I'm like, okay, cool. I understand what happened, and I'm ready to get on with episode 8. And I want to see season 2 at this point, because honestly, by the time this episode ended, I was like, well, I figured we were going to get all background, all kind of a backstory, 16 years ago, flashback stuff. But now we have like probably an hour. I'm going to probably guess it's probably around that 50-minute mark. It's probably going to be on the longer side. But that's all we have to wrap all this stuff up. And there's so much stuff that is not wrapped up. So I'm more vested now, I guess, in all of that. It's great that we got the backstory. I feel a little underwhelmed and disappointed about what really happened on Brenock. I've got some questions about really that. Was that enough for somebody like Torbin, a Jedi, to take their life? I don't know. We'll get into some of the other choices that were made around some of the character motives and aspects of them that I was just kind of scratching my head on. But overall, I think it was a good episode.
Can I ask you a question about your thought there before you move on to your other thoughts? If you had to choose, I like the way this episode segued from the last one to the flashback. It made a lot more sense. It wasn't as jarring as episode 3. But do you think if you were going to do a flashback, you probably could have got away with just this one rather than 3 as well? You think this would have been sufficient? Or do you think there was anything in episode 3 that really, that would be critical that we would have missed if we didn't have the third one and we did something else instead? Does that make sense? Yeah,
sort of. I think is the question whether or not I would have done just one episode rather than having two?
Did we really need 2 flashbacks?
Yeah,
or could we have just got away with this one? Like the way that it was segued, we could have kept building up to it, and then we finally saw the big reveal of 16 years later in episodes 6 or 7 or whatever.
I mean, probably. I think it goes back to the pacing of the episodes, not necessarily the pacing within the episodes themselves, but the pacing of how the episodes were laid out. Mm-hmm. A lot of talk has been said about the length of time. And there's been some questionable things about, okay, I see why they cut it. We talked about this already a few episodes back about why they cut it at a certain mark. But I think depending if the story was longer, then, if we had like 45-minute episodes, I think you probably could have successfully merged these two into one. I like the fact that Leslie Headland was playing with this Rashomon effect. I just don't know that the Rashomon effect was as insightful as I was expecting it to be.
Yeah.
You know, and again, I don't want to, we're going to get into all this as we continue to discuss. So I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but so yeah, I think the short answer is yeah, but I think the episode probably would have had to have been longer. And I don't think that was really in the cards from the get go. So, I think one of the, so let me get to the positive stuff, the stuff that I really, first off, the Jedi are good people. The Jedi are human, and the Jedi Order is a good order, right? They still are the light of the galaxy, and that was not broken here. This is what I've been fighting with, that and stupid metal detectors. That's what I've been fighting about the most today. The Jedi are human. They make mistakes. Shut Up Laura on Twitter, if you guys follow her, she posted something, or no, it wasn't Shut Up Laura. She reposted it. It was from Kelly Knox. Kelly Knox posted some little article about, it was an interview with George Lucas, and he says the exact same words. And I go find it. I didn't get a chance to capture or to bring it into it, but basically George Lucas saying, look, the Jedi are human. And because they're human, they're going to make mistakes. And that is exactly what we saw here. It doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's just they made mistakes, and mistakes were made, choices were made. Unfortunately, they weren't the best choices, and it didn't paint a good light for Sol in the end. But he's human, and you can see the motive behind it, right? And we'll get into that as well, like whether it's the nobility or more of the will of the Force, right? There's probably some balance between those two where he was felt driven to make those decisions. So I did enjoy that. They didn't crap on the Jedi. I like that a lot. On the technical side, I love the de-aging that they did, whether that was reface, deep fake, whatever technology they've used, they finally got it. Like, compare this to what we got with Luke Skywalker and The Mandalorian and some of the other stuff that we've seen, even more recently with Indiana Jones, like that movie. This is like, there were moments in there where I just was like, it looked like they were younger actors playing these roles, right? 16 years before. So great stuff. I really enjoyed that. Dean Charles Chapman's lightsaber game. Holy crap. That was eye candy. I mean, it was just wonderful to watch him sitting there swinging that thing around. I know it was very short. And I know that, again, I like shiny things. So that was a lot of fun to watch. But then just kind of like the last thing is just that duality between choice and destiny, right? To coin the episode titles for both this and the third episode. I like that. There's so many examples in this episode where you were really thinking about, okay, is this really destiny or is it choice? I think, on the nose, it's really about Osha's choice, right? She chose you. She chose you. That's when NSA is talking to Sol. But there's so many other examples that we'll get into as we discuss that, is it really destiny? Is it really the will of the Force? Or is it like Andara says, this is just your emotions. This is your selfishness. This is what you want to happen. This is your will. You're willing to make this happen, or willing to see something that's really not there because it serves your own purposes, kind of thing. That was really crafty, the way there was a lot of examples in this episode. So I did enjoy that from the writing perspective.
And you know what, Albert? We were actually kind of right about the conception or the creation of the twins too.
Oh yeah,
which was that was an unexpected surprise.
Well, we threw out like 15 theories, so I mean, it's a
but it was
game.
actually one that I don't think got surfaced or circulated all that much. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, it was. It is nice to toot our own horn. We'll have to do that more on the Patreon show because I don't want to come off as again pretentious or anything on this episode, but. With the Patreon members,
it's too late, buddy.
We'll flaunt it all day.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into the breakdown and start picking apart this thing page by page, if you will. So we open up on brenock 16 years later. When I saw that, I was like, okay, here we go. We're in. We kind of figured as much. So the Jedi are there to investigate some virgins. You and I talked about the virgins, and I think it was, I don't know if it was it was when we were talking about whether or not they were a dyad in the Force. It was a Patreon episode again. That's where we really get into the meat and potatoes of stuff. But we talked about this idea that maybe the girls are virgins. And so we were kind of, at least hitting the right tone there as well. But I got a question about that a little bit later, and hopefully I remember. Let me ask you now. I'm going to ask you now because I don't want to forget. As I was watching this episode, and after I've seen it 3 times now, plus I did show notes, so technically 4, I still don't know. And I haven't seen this question posed, so I'm starting to think, well, maybe it's all in my head and there's really nothing here. But I started to wonder, is the virgins in the Force because the twins were born, or was it a chicken and egg thing? Okay. Mm-hmm. Was the twins, are they what caused life to be born, or was the virgins what caused life and the twins to be born? Like, which came first in your head?
The way I interpreted from the episode is that life had been building on this planet for a while. So I viewed that as predating the twins. And for those that, again, kind of to go back to the episode, what they dropped an Easter egg that ties back to Light of the Jedi and the Great Hyperspace Disaster. Mm-hmm. And so when the Great Hyperspace Disaster happened, a lot of planets were destroyed, or maybe not destroyed, but their ecosystems were completely ruined. And this system was one of those systems, and this planet was cataloged as a planet that had no life on it whatsoever. So it was abandoned, but they somehow found that there was life teeming on it and thriving and doing well. So that's why our team is there in the first place and stationed there for the last, I can't remember how it was, like 6 months, 7 months, something like that, or 7 weeks, maybe
7 weeks, yeah.
whatever Torbin was complaining about. But yeah, so that's why they're there. But so it seemed to me like it probably had been teeming for a while, because this was very lush, and that just doesn't happen within a decade or so or two or anything like that. It seems like it would be doing this over the course of many, many years, and maybe was protected from it in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but this is one of those open-ended questions I think Leslie had, was that we're probably not going to have answered, that we have to kind of debate for ourselves, and how that fits in. Of, well, even is it a vergence? Is it a nexus in the Force? You know, and things like that. But what I liked about it was also that they validated this place as a nexus is a location, or a vergence is a location, which makes Mace's comments in The Phantom Menace even, I think, more appropriate, right? Because he's surprised like it's around this boy, because usually it's around a place, not a person.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and we said as much during the Patreon show when we covered this. Let's table that. I have it as a question to bring up on Sunday night. We can dig more into, you know, the vergence and, you know, which came first kind of thing. Because it is a fun debate. And I think the more you think about it, you can find holes in both and find arguments for both, honestly.
This helps differentiate between Anakin, I think, too. So it's an important distinction here of things that they're doing to continue to pull those apart, that they are not, Anakin as the chosen one is not the same situation as what we have here on Brenock.
Yeah. So they're going around, they're scanning everything, using metal detectors.
It was weird to see.
I mean, technical details about metal detectors now, but they're taking samples of soil. I saw somebody post a picture too, by the way. There was I think it's when Sol's bending down, he's grabbing the moss and he's putting it in the background. You see Adara, and someone said Carrie Ann Moss, and then it said Carrie and Moss. Yeah, which, okay. Of course,
we see what you did there, internet.
Yeah, I forget the guy's name who did it. It was pretty clever. But anyways, there was, we got the reference to the Great Hyper a little bit later. They talk about the Great Disaster, which we've already discussed, and explains why they're there now, right? So we know why they were there. The one thing I have a question about is later on, or I guess maybe when it was episode 1 or 2, they talked about they were stationed there. There was a Jedi temple station. I have to go back and listen or rewatch it, but
Vernestra, I think, was saying that, right?
That they were stationed there or whatever. And I took that as a Jedi temple, and I think we had some questions around why were that many Jedi in this desolate planet in a temple. And I thought, well, maybe it's because they're keeping an eye on the witches. But now that probably makes sense. I don't know if there was a Jedi temple. Again, I could have been reading too much into it. Either way, we know why they're there on Brenock at this point.
Right.
We go back, we quickly go to the Jedi camp. We get the, maybe a little quip there about, it's not, don't upset the Wookiee. So you can't let them win or lose, and you can't, tell them you hate their food.
Right. Yeah. You can't second guess their dining choices or their cooking.
They probably have the worst party nights, like game board party nights, right?
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah. You can't say anything that would mildly offend them, will rip your arms off.
So we learned that it's been a 7-week mission. Torbin is wanting to go home, and he's pretty consistent throughout all of this. I don't know how old he is and how old he's supposed to be, but I just want to say, if, again, as a parent, if you have children, this is not uncommon. Whether you're at church and they're 10 minutes in going, when are we leaving? Or you're at grandma's house and they really don't want to be there because there's no internet, or you've taken them to the bar and they're bored. No, I'm kidding. I don't drink, but you know what I'm saying? Kids this is very typical. Now, is it typical of a Jedi? No. I think the criticism of hey, I'd like to know why he wanted to go to Coruscant. I think you could say there's something there, but the fact that he was there for 7 weeks is a long time, and to not really know why he was there. I mean, this comes up a little bit later when Sol and Indara are kind of talking back and forth, and Sol finally tells him, and Indara fires back and is like, hey, I like to let my I want him to go and seek the answers out himself. It doesn't sound like he was doing it, which I guess there is a life lesson there as well. I actually did appreciate that, even though it seems like it's cheap or lazy writing. It's not. It's called parenthood sometimes. It's called being a mentor. It's called being a teacher. It's about enabling people, trying to enable people to seek out answers for themselves. This is real life, believe it or not. Is 7 weeks excessive? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. I guess it depends on what they're doing, but that's just my thoughts on it.
This happened in early in phase 1 too. I believe in the young adult or the middle grade books. I can't remember which character it was. I don't think it was Emery, but it was another character that didn't really want to leave. Maybe it was Wreath. Didn't really want to leave Coruscant at all. Kind of a bookworm. Didn't want to be out in the field. Thought that was his lot of life. Was it Emery? Yeah.
Yeah.
It was one of them. I can't remember
Wreath.
which one. Yeah, I think Wreath does sound right. Yeah, so Wreath didn't want to get out either. So I think this is also just common. I think you get comfortable with where you at. You called it home.
Yep.
I think that's another thing you have to recognize is that that's where they've grown up. This might be his first true field mission, possibly, kind of like it was for Jackie. Rest in peace. So it could have been one of those types of situations too. But this isn't. This is not the first time. I kind of viewed that as a bit of a callback to the books as well.
Yeah, that's a good call out too. I had not thought about that, but Dara tells him not to center around his anxieties. And then they start bringing up the virgins, right? About whether that there's a virgins there. They go into some more explanation about emergence, which doesn't conflict with anything. I think it's been pretty consistent, even with the stuff that we had from movies and elsewhere. But it says emergence. Soul says emergence could create life, like what we see on this planet. It's a power that should be studied, protected. Nothing could be more important to the Jedi. And this really kind of plays into a lot of where Saul's coming from and why he's motivated to do so much, because it does feel like he's very passionate about this. And when you start coupling his passion with the nobility, with being the Jedi Guardian, being the parent, being called to the will of the Force, and seeing Osha as his Padawan, all of this is just kind of this, maelstrom of what ends up being, a very poor decision making here a little bit later.
Right.
Let's see. All right. Sorry, I want to go to the comments just quickly. I didn't mean to skip over everybody here. Let's see. Zora, when we're talking about our opening thoughts, she says, I think for me, it's the pacing I have the biggest issue with. They're building things up, and I don't particularly feel satisfied by how they pay off. Kind of in that same boat. JW agrees. Yeah, pacing has definitely been the biggest issue. Things just don't seem to have a ton of time to breathe and grow. And I think that's fair too. Like, if we had spent more time with some of these episodes, I don't necessarily think I would have as much feedback on the pacing, right? If we could spend time. He said it's still been fun though. Ippolito's here. One up says, got to test the grass M count. Force sensitive grass.
It seems appropriate at this point.
Yeah.
How do you test for aversions anyway?
Yeah. I don't know. I would think with the Force, but I mean the metal detector. So why am I talking about metal detectors? Oh, I know why.
You keep bringing it up.
I've been talking about it all day. I was in an argument with somebody about why would they bring metal detectors to search for virgins in the Force, and I thought, the virgins in the Force doesn't necessarily mean it is a place. It doesn't mean it's always going to be a person. It could be a thing, and so maybe it's an artifact. Maybe it's some Sith artifact they were looking for, some Force sensitive artifact. I don't know. Who cares? It's not important. I mean, if that's what you're getting hung up on.
Maybe it's a cave finder. It's a cave detector. It's not a metal detector. It's a cave detector. Looking for caverns.
Probably a food detector.
It's true. Wookiees are always thinking of their stomachs.
Yeah. So, but all right. Anyways, that's my thoughts on that. Okay, we go back to Brenock in the Force, and Soul says that Torbin was disturbed, and Dura says that no, it was he who was disturbed. Right. This is again, you're projecting essentially here. And then this is where she gets in the whole thing. She says, I don't tell him answers to ease his mind. I teach him to seek the answers for himself. And then she says, you don't disagree. She says, you disagree. That's why you don't have a Padawan. Again, here's another, I don't know, call it red flag, but another, I don't know, check the box, if you will, on what's driving Saul here to go and suddenly seek out Osha the way he does.
Yeah, and this is like coaching 101 that Indara is really trying to do, right? You want people you want to ask questions and you want to lead them to where they know they can answer the question for themselves, and they can start to solve their own problems by critically thinking and digging through and recognizing the layers that go into it and the thinking process that goes beyond just what's right in front of them. I think that's what she's trying to teach them. And she was absolutely right. Soul, while it may not have come across on screen, Soul was kind of shortcutting some of that too. Just saying that he didn't want to deal with the discomfort about it and maybe the uncomfortableness of what Torbin was throwing out there of basically complaining and whining a little bit, and just kind of cut to the quick and say, well, here's what we're really out here. Yeah. Real quick question on that. We had talked about this in the text message, but I think just to confirm. So we believe that Indara was not only the leader of the team, but probably a Jedi master at this point, because she does have an inroad with the council. it seems like Kelnaka and Sol were Jedi Knights.
That's my guess.
And then Torbin the Padawan. We
yeah,
kind of in agreement on that one.
Yeah, and I think I don't know that we'll necessarily touch on this as we break down the episode, but I think the gist of our conversation was that there are many examples in here where she just pulls rank. Like they don't even question it. She just says, "Go do this, do that," and they do it. They execute. And so either she's just the appointed like team leader of the group, and they just fall in line, kind of thing. Not necessarily probably the first thing I would think of with the Jedi. It feels like they are more Jedi Knights, and they've had some experience. They've gone through the trials, but they've got a master here. They've got somebody, and honestly, rightfully so. Like she made all the right decisions until the very end,
right.
And we'll get into why that is, of course. But for the most part, yeah, she was spot on with everything. She was doing everything by the book, doing everything by the numbers. So she definitely had the experience and the wisdom here, outranked all those guys in terms of that alone. All right, so we go into I guess what we're seeing some kind of flashbacks here, I guess stuff that we had already seen before, and we're not going to spend any time on this because it's already happened, but just to cover it, we see Saul snooping around. He sees the twins underneath the bunta tree. Coral runs off with the girls. This is where he tries to make something we didn't see that I don't recall, where he tries to call in to Endara and he's unable to get a hold of her, of course. So
right,
that's
what sparks his concern is I think he sees how rough Coral is with the girls,
right,
and feels like they're in danger. I think that's where his anxiety start to rise.
Yes, it's all just kind of compounding on each other. Right. A good call out, and we need to call those out because it is important. It's in the context of why decisions were made. But the girls head into the fortress with Coral at that point. It was funny when he climbed the wall. Right before he climbed the wall, I was like, oh. It's going to be him that calls crimes up. We've been talking about this since the teasers came out, before the series came out, about who was climbing that wall. And we had said it was probably Mae. Turns out it was Sol. I got to call him Sol, not Saul, because Saul is from somebody else in
Italian,
New York.
right? Yeah.
Italian. So Mae's, then his next insight is Mae defending her and Osha from the Force, right? And all he's getting is, oh my God, they're being attacked. Like they're being hurt. They're being tortured in some way, right? These dark side users are doing this. That's horrible. So he sees that, and then we get a reveal as to what it was that Coral heard. She heard a noise. We had all kinds of theories out there about what this was. Turns out it was just Sol out there snooping around.
Yeah, being clumsy, breaking and entering, committing crimes.
Yeah, exactly. More on that later. But the the witches, he goes and sees the witches doing kind of their tailgate party for the ceremony that night. They're out there doing their witchy stuff. And of course that looks spooky. Like, whoa, I don't know what this is, but
in front of a big hole, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
Again, it's the concept. They're all worshiping there, it looks like, and having a ceremony or a seance or whatever you want to call it in front of a hole. So again, like you were saying before, all these things start building up for Sol as he starts to piece together what he believes is going to happen at this ritual.
Yeah. I mean, he's probably thinking they're going to pitch those children down the hole. It's a, make the sacrifice kind of thing, right? His worst fears are playing into all of this. So he gets back to the Jedi camp, and this is where, he starts telling. He's like, I think they're witches. We get the Night Sisters comment, which was kind of cool that they brought that up. Like Torbin, that's immediately where Torbin's mind went. And then Dara says, look, they don't raise younglings, let alone train them, which is true. We've seen that in the Clone Wars episodes. But he goes on to explain, look, they don't treat these girls like children, which I thought, really? That's kind of ironic considering what the Jedi do with children. But let's not talk about that. He says he saw the Force push. He says he feels for the girls' safety. The witches are preparing some kind of ceremony tonight. He's worried the girls are in danger. He goes on and on. And so Endara does what I think any normal level-headed Jedi Master would do, is like, okay, well, let's check in with High Council. Let's see what they say. Says that she wants to do it. He insists at that point that this is something that he feels obligated to do. And I think this is where it really felt like he was coming, like it was similar to Qui-Gon Jinn in that he was starting to feel the will of the Force. So the way Qui-Gon was attracted and felt committed to Anakin, I saw some similarities here throughout this episode. And I think this is one of the bigger ones where he finally put his foot down and is like, every Jedi chooses their own path, to coin a phrase from the High Republic. This is exactly what he was doing. I don't care what the council says. This is what I feel the will of the Force is driving me to do. I think there are aspects of the nobility in there as well. That comes up a little bit later, especially when we get that kind of deadpan line from Anastasia about the nobility of the Jedi. And some of it is also just coming from his own internal fears that he's concocted in his mind about what's going to happen to the safety of the children.
And for Andara, it comes back to something. You're right, Soul. Something doesn't quite feel right here. So let's go check it out. I think that's why she gives in, right? Things aren't adding up. Things just feel out of place. This doesn't, like, they shouldn't be doing this in the first place. You know, let's just see what they're up to, and we'll make a decision there. Because I don't know. I think she wasn't totally sure what she would go back and say to the High Council at that point. If she was able to get eyes on, she had a much better feel, and especially if they were going to talk to him, much better feel for what they're doing, and to be able to get that guidance from the council.
Yeah. So he convinces her. They head out to the fortress. This is where they break in. I was like, I don't know if this is really what a Jedi would do. Like, I figured they would have at least knocked.
Right.
But whatever. She's like, Kalnaka splits.
They're not vampires, Albert. You don't have to invite them in. Yeah, this was a little odd that he just slice in Kalnaka.
Yeah, we're fine. We're okay with that. We did get confirmation that it was a mining site. I think you and I had theorized that was probably it. I think at that time, in the context of that theory, I think we were looking for cortosis. I'm sorry. We were talking about cortosis, and maybe there's some other kind of mineral that they were sitting on or whatever. But nonetheless, it's a mine of some sort. And then Andorra wants to go in alone, right? And this is where Saul's like, hey, no, we all need to do this together. He kind of really pushes her hard on this. Like, it should be all of us going in, not just one of us. I think from her standpoint, the smart thing probably would have been one person. Like, if you have a force of suddenly 4 Jedi show up, like, when do 4 Jedi ever show up to anything? It's usually one or one and a Padawan that show up, because that's really all you need. And so I think from her perspective, she's looking at it like this, like, hey, if we all go in here, they're going to look at this as a sign of hostility or, I don't know, aggro of some sort, right? So I think she made the right decision. But
exactly. And I think when you look at it with other Force groups, and we saw this in the kind of the primary and the prime High Republic era too, they don't always get along very well. Even if they don't know each other, they don't know their history or whatever. Everybody knows the Jedi. And when you start thinking, they've already classified them as witches, so they already have their perspective on it. I think Andara knows that the top could be blown off of this thing really quick. Mother Anastasia sees it very much in the same way too. She will be more strict and direct and enforce boundaries, but at the same time, she doesn't want it to escalate either, even though they will show a bit of a show of force, I think, with the way they've organized, although I think that was mostly to protect the kids, and Coral was organizing some of that aggression side. But I think you're right. I think she probably should have gone in alone, or maybe her and Soul, or her and maybe not with Torbin, but maybe her and Soul. I could kind of see that, but all 4 of them, one of them being a giant Wookiee, probably a little intimidating, or at least be viewed as you trying to intimidate them and impose your will on it, when there's already going to be tension between any group and a Jedi Force.
Yeah. Betty Mez has joined. Why did they wait 2 months to discuss the real objective, looking for virgins only 2 months after their arrival? We covered this earlier, so I don't want to come back to it, but just maybe rewind or check back when you get. What I would say is I would agree 2 months seems excessive, but I think there's a reason there, and it comes down to kind of life lessons type thing. Ippolito says he loved the episode. We got to see the humanity, so to speak, of the Jedi. I think Torbin really shows how sheltered the Jedi were. Flawed and powerful. Soul is being super Sithy. Yeah, I mean, we got to remember too, this is, it's the height of the Jedi Order, but arguably it's the height of their arrogance too, especially coming off of Phase 3. Like, we don't know where that landed. They could feel really proud about what they're doing. And so somebody like Adara is going, yeah, I'm going to let them sweat it out for 7 weeks, even though probably after 4, she might have like, hey, think you should probably ask questions about what we're doing here, kind of what you were talking about earlier. So anyways,
right.
Okay. She says, yeah, I agree. Let's all go in, but let's stay vigilant. And they head in. So, we get to see the meet and greet, which we saw in the Destiny episode. And then we get the insight into what the heck was going on with Torbin, which I thought was good. I like this. And I think it explains a lot, again, stuff that I don't think is being discussed enough out there on the interwebs. So I want to cover it here a little bit later, but I think it explains a lot of how Torbin is acting from this point on. But she's really playing into his fears. She even says, like, at one point, I forget, she mentions, you are a strong and good Jedi. Like, she's probing, trying to find some kind of weakness, some type of desire, some kind of baggage or whatever else that, taboo type stuff. And she's not finding a lot here with this kid. I mean, he seems pretty straight and straight as an arrow, if you will. But she does tap into this like, hey, don't you want to leave? Again, you can speculate on as to whether or not there's a motive there for him to go back outside of just being a kid on a planet and feeling like no one's giving you answers. And yet, while you're not taking the initiative to ask anything, all this kind of plays into all that. But she's really playing up this fear, and she does it over and over and over again. I haven't been a big fan of the direction of either this episode or episode 3, but I did like this sequence. I like the way it was cut. I like the way the camera angles were shifting. There was a lot of movement with the cameras. I thought it was a great sequence, and it certainly explains what Anastasia was trying to do. She was really just trying to get under him, trying to find something to expose him and use that as leverage to say, look, Jedi, you guys have come in here, but we have the upper hand. We can do this to him. We can do this to all of you as well. It was really kind of a check kind of thing, if nothing else.
Yeah, and I love the change. As soon as he gives in, she's just like kneel, and just enforces her power, and it's game over. It was just like in a snap, everything changed, for Torbin, that he was completely under his power just by opening himself up to her, which adds a lot of questions of how Kelnaka was so susceptible to it. And we didn't really get that. So I think this sequence was so strong in that one that it actually hurt the Kelnaka possession later on. So when we talk about that, maybe we'll come back and reference this of why they didn't maybe do this a second time. But I'm with you. I thought this was really well done. I like the poking. I love the prodding of it. And it wasn't that she was seducing him in some ways, although it kind of came across that way in some ways. It was more about gaining trust, but also saying, look, you playing this out really well. You have needs and desires and things that you want to do too, but no one's listening. No one's taking you seriously. Why shouldn't you be able to ask for help? I can actually help you get out of here. Now, you're not going to like how I get you there, but it's just kind of typical of a dark side user as we would normally paint them. But it was cool to be able to see just how manipulative she could be and what it meant to be able to possess them and put into context what we saw back in episode 3.
Yeah, it was, and I have this in my notes too. The exact line, she says, I would not keep you from what you want. I would always let you have what you need. That is the dark side talking, right? Giving you exactly what you want, given into your desires kind of thing. Even if it's just as simple as going home, right? It's not what he's supposed to be doing. He's supposed to be there on a mission, dedicated to that mission, regardless of what it is. And she's saying, no, you don't have to do that. I can give you another option, another way out of here. So I did like that it was laced in the dark side. It also, I mean, we didn't necessarily bring this up, but she was definitely probing his mind. I love that little line about their son of paupers from the planet of Bonadon, really getting into his head. I mean, that's got to be terrifying to hear somebody call you out on something like that. I mean, especially something like that. That is a memory that has not been with him for a very long time, right? Because he's been in the Jedi Order for a long time. Sure, for her to go back that far and that deep to pull that out and throw that in his face has got to be unsettling, I would think.
Well, it goes back to Chimera. Like, I can't read your thoughts, but it seems like she was able to read thoughts or at least pluck very specific things out. Also, quick trivia thing. Bonadon is the start of the Hydian way.
Oh, is it? I know it from the old Han Solo books, and that's about it. I think it's been in canon since then, but that's as far as I know. It was a nice little Easter egg, probably for a lot of different people, depending on how old you are. She says, he finally says, I want to go to Coruscant. And then she says, kneel. All right. That's when he falls to his knees. And, they agree that they're going to do the testing, the next day, as we saw in Destiny at that point. So it was a good sequence. I enjoyed it. Now, keep this in mind. From here on out, this kid is not only dealing with the anxiety that he's had of like, why the hell am I here? Why am I here? Then finding out that we're there for this Vergence thing. And that's like, he's just hyper focused on like, okay, I just want to get that out of the way to get home. Lay all of this on top of that, where now he's got all this trauma, having somebody probed his mind, and things start to make more sense of why he's just as kind of, I don't know, why he makes the decisions he does later on so easily, when it's easy to kind of dismiss it off as like, well, he shouldn't do that because he's a Jedi. No, it's not as easy.
Yeah, the unpredictable behavior sometimes seems extreme until you start to piece together and build the story, kind of like for Soul, similar way. When you start to pile it all together and you build it, you start to see why they act unpredictably and a bit erratically.
Yeah.
Especially young people, right?
Right. Exactly. That's my point. He's a kid. Jedi or not, he's a kid. so we get to the ship at this point. I did like his look. I mean, he looks completely shell shocked. He's just sitting there, dumbfounded, while Indara and kind of I think it's Soul that are kind of walking around him. But I just wondered, like, what is going through his mind at that point? He looks totally dejected.
When Indara looked like she may have been reprimanding him to an extent as well.
Well, yeah, like, what was that about? I'm surprised they didn't ask him questions. I mean, they certainly have the time. Maybe, I don't know, but it feels like they would have. Maybe they had just had that conversation. We didn't get a chance to see it, but I would have thought they would have asked him, "What happened? Why were your eyes black? What were you feeling?" That kind of thing. Who knows what he said? Like, I get the impression that he didn't say anything because he's probably too scared or wasn't ready to talk about it.
Yeah,
I imagine Saul would have just went and pulled it out of his head, but he's done other worse things.
No, he hasn't.
I know, I'm kidding. So Indara thinks that okay, she thanks Soul at this point for going through and recommending the testing because in her mind, she's thinking, okay, well, this will give us time to check in with council. That's not what Saul is doing at all. He's absolutely in it because he says, I feel a connection to Osha. I feel she's meant to be my Padawan. He's really kind of coming from his own kind of self-interest here. Again, driven by, I think, what is the will of the Force, or at least the calling of the will of the Force as much as he feels it.
Yeah, and this was a nice Easter egg, too, because I think remember how many Jedi Knights find their Padawans is that they're not assigned like Ahsoka was assigned to Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah.
It's usually more of a feeling, and there is some sort of connection with someone. And Soul presumably doesn't sound like he's had that kind of draw to anybody for a Padawan, and maybe views himself maybe like Anakin in some ways, just not ready for a Padawan or whatever. And then all of a sudden you have some sort of connection with somebody, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is it.
Yep.
This is it. I mean, it's like being in a relationship almost. Like, this is it. Like, I'm all in. I'm excited. Let's do it. And all of a sudden he sees this kid that needs something, and he realizes that he needs something too, and he needs a pupil if you want to go that route, And so you start to see why some of those feelings and those emotions start to really rise, and they stay on the surface, and they don't go away, and it's clouding his judgment.
Yeah. No, 100%. I agree with all of that. Betty Mess says NSA is really strong and powerful in those scenes.
She was
Jodie Turner-Smith is just crazy good,
crushing this whole series.
I said that
amazing.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I grief as I gave that third episode, I said in that episode she was outstanding, and she continues to be outstanding. I haven't seen her in anything else, but I'm intrigued. I'd love to see her in more stuff, honestly.
Yeah.
Okay, so so Indara says, look, this is foolish, right? She's too old. Osha's way too old. The Coven's not going to let her go. I mean, this is
put her other thing that you're already too old to be in the Jedi. So that's not a new thing from some of this stuff. That's already happened, I guess.
Yes. Yeah, it's already been established. I think we had talked about whether or not this was kind of like one of the first things that really did it. I mean, it's probably in their mind when they're looking at Anakin Skywalker walk in, right? And here we go, another virgins in the Force. Mm-hmm. Been here kind of thing. If Yoda even knows. More on that later. Next week.
When Yoda shows up? No, that's not happening.
No. He goes into, again, more reasons, says that Mae was marked with the dark side. He talks about how he's worried about the girls, says that he thinks that Osha wants to leave with them. And she's like, hey, no, you're confusing what you want with what she wants, which I don't know if that was really fair. Like, I think maybe, again, we only saw Osha's perspective, but I think I walked away from that episode like, yeah, she wants to join. Like, she was all in about, let me see your, which she was like looking at the lightsaber, and then she tells her mom, Mama, can I show him what you taught me, kind of thing. She was almost like she was trying to prove herself, right? So I don't know if that was really a fair. I mean, I get it from Indara's perspective. She's probably looking at this as going, okay, you're just projecting what you want. But I think there was some sincerity there coming. Well, I know there is. There's some sincerity coming from Osha in not wanting to be around these evil people, like in her sister, who's kind of bat crazy at times.
Yeah, but I think Indara maybe has a clearer example of it when they do the testing and the coaching that she accuses him of, which I think was absolutely spot on. We talked about that back in episode 3. But we have it here in this moment too. Why else would you show her the coolest thing in the galaxy with your lightsaber and let her hold it? I mean, if that's not tempting a kid with like, yeah, I'm coming with you if I get one of those because I'm going to be a badass.
Kenobi did it with Luke.
Yeah, and Luke tried to do it with Grogu. I mean, it's
just what Jedi do. They pull out their lightsabers. Look, kid, you want to fire this thing off?
Yeah, it's amazing, right? So I think she's not wrong, I think, because while I think Soul was being compassionate, and I absolutely agree with you, I think it's clear, and we get this from Osha's perspective, and this is where Osha's point of view is important in episode 3, of saying that she is not happy with where she's at. She does want something different. The Jedi do present something different, but to say that they're just receiving all of this from her, I think is probably not 100% accurate. Definitely Soul is acting in ways that probably normal Jedi aren't acting, and he's almost recruiting her in some ways, I think.
Yeah.
You could debate what the degree of all of that is, of course, but I think there is a bit of both sides trying to. One's very interested, and the other one's like, "Cool, I'm interested too. Like, come on, let's join up. Would you like to be my Padawan? We can do it."
Check this. Ippolito says, I think Torbin's experience really explains why his present day force shield in hermit mode. It's like he vowed to never be infiltrated again. I like that. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, he was just that traumatized. He's like, this is never happening again. They're probably going to come after me. Well, I think he was expecting her to show up at some point, or somebody might show up. And so, yeah, that's probably why he went into that isolation mode. One Up versus CPU says, I noticed the monitor on the ship had an image that looked like Palpatine's throne room window. I think I know what you're talking about. It's the monitor screen when they're looking at the blood test, maybe that same screen. It had that same kind of like honeycomb window thing going on.
And they had it with on the big map that Indar's looking at. It was like the audio description called it like a map of the galaxy or something like that as well.
Interesting. I'm sure that was intentional. Seems like a lot of this stuff is. He's a Padawan. He's supposed to confront his thoughts with his master. I was surprised he did try to speak with Indara, or didn't try to speak with Indara. Maybe. Yeah, it was I'm sure they did at some point, but maybe we just weren't privy to that conversation. Okay. Let's see. All right. So we just talked about, him projecting all of that and Dara kind of calling him out, saying this is what you want, not necessarily what she wants. We get some more catch up moments here, meaning we get to see Mae and Osha show up for the testing. We get the blood sample. Mae blows the test. We got to see that in all its glory. And then what was interesting is this. I love the way Carrie-Anne Moss played this, like the way she talked to the kid. It was very, she made herself very vulnerable, was at her kind of eye level, all the things you would want to do in order to kind of really connect with a child. But she does say, look, she asked her about the ceremony, right? The ascension is what she ends up calling it. And she calls it, you've got a very beautiful marking on your head. It's important. She confirms it with Mae that it is part of the ceremony. And we also learned the ceremony was to put them in place of leading the coven at some point, which, that in itself is like Indara. I think she challenges that. Like you're putting, kids later. She talks about putting kids in charge.
I love Mae's response. How does that work? How are you going to be a leader? She's like, I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah. Ahsoka didn't know either. Yeah. She was running around leading people all day long. Again, I'm just saying, two Jedi. There's so many times in here where Indara, like the Jedi are like, they're being righteous and pretentious about, oh, we can't allow this to happen. I'm like, guys, you're doing the same thing, but I get it. You're coming from the light and they're coming from the dark. That's the difference. But anyways, and then the misquote, which again is very, like, how many times has a kid come up to you and said something, you're like, what? And then you go back and find out, okay, no, they heard something absolutely the wrong way, or it was completely taken out of context. Right. I have so many examples.
And again, they don't understand what they're hearing necessarily.
Yeah.
When they talk about sacrifice, you have to sacrifice a part of yourself. I can imagine an 8-year-old probably doesn't quite understand what that means, either physically or existentially. Right.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. It's almost a literal term.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's literal. And so when you say you have to be sacrificed to everybody or whatever it was.
She says everyone must walk through fear.
She got that part
Everyone
right.
must be sacrificed to fulfill their destiny. Quote Palpatine, Sidious.
Yeah, right. With that giant hole that they were all worshiping with their hands over them. They tossed the other kids in there.
We're all going to jump in there.
Right. And Dara already kind of called it funny. She's like, they're a little bit later on, 50 women and 2 kids. Like something just doesn't, like none of this stuff adds up. Right. There's something different going on here than what we're aware of. And she's trying to think of it in a more critical fashion. But all of the facts are getting so skewed at this point and jumbled that it's difficult to make sense of and heads or tails of what's real and what's not real.
And Anastasia's original quote from episode 3, she says, ascension is about walking through fear. It is about sacrificing a part of yourself.
Right.
Which makes sense. Like, okay, that's, this is very similar. Again, it's on par. Like you could point to examples of the Jedi where they teach something very similar to this, right?
Right.
But anyways, completely taken out of context or misquoted. And so Indara says she isn't feeling great about what Sol is doing. This is where she talks about, like, you know, what you were doing there and kind of coaching her and really getting her to say what you want her to say. And then she takes a deep breath. And while she's looking at Sol doing this, there's a moment in there where she, like, you can see her take a deep breath. And she's like, oh, my gosh, I can't believe he's doing this. Like, she doesn't say anything, but you can see it all over her face that she's not really happy with where Sol's going with, you know, some of the questions and talking about, you know, the Jedi and this wonderful magical place of Oz that, you know, he hopes to take her to someday, kind of thing. I think the audio description did say that she had an uneasy look on her face when she was looking at Sol.
Yeah, it was a little difficult to see. It almost looked like a slight smile, but that was definitely not a smile, according to the audio description. You're absolutely right. She was very uneasy with what Sol was doing, and it explains the abruptness of the let's get back to the test when he's talking to Osha.
Yeah.
You know, of let's get back on task. And again, you see it when they pan out at the very end of the scene. You can see, and the audio description does a good job of this, that Sol is happily administering the test, right? So he's all in and enjoying the experience and connecting with her and giving that verbal affirmation and the kind of reward system of saying, yeah, great job. You're doing great, kid. Keep it up.
Yeah. Right. And this is a good example of where Indara just starts pulling rank left and right. She tells Torbin to go upload the samples, get back to work out in the field. And he's kind of like, what? You know, I got to go back out there. I was going to Taji Station and pick up some power from her. He tells Sol comes up and she says she's going to wait for the results. And she wants to wait for the word from council about what to do next. And Sol's like, hey, why? She passed the test, you know? Again, this is where he's thinking, why are we interfering with the will of the Force? Why are we interfering with my destiny or, you know, her choice or whatever it is, even though they don't have the test results yet? So I think he's really questioning, like, why even send the blood? Why are we doing this? Like, this is... You know, it feels like it's more of a formality, but we're done here as far as I'm concerned. Like, let's just take her and get the hell out of here. But Indara dismisses him. She reiterates that she's waiting for the results and word from council, and he just kind of walks off like, okay, well, she's spoken type thing.
Yeah, and again, she's pushing back on him of saying just because you got the results, the answers you wanted doesn't mean that that it is a formality, right? And she's just pushing back that, no, there are still protocols in place about what we're going to do and how we need to operate with this, and we don't just quit all that stuff just because this is what you want, right? Qui-Gon,
yeah. Yeah. We go over to the Jedi camp, and we get the word that Sol says he feels like there's something wrong here. He's just got this, again, uneasy feeling about everything, the way it's all kind of playing out here.
His anxieties are
you can see it on his face, which, you know, he does a great job as always acting in that character. It's still crazy to think he can't speak English. Like, I know he struggles with some sentences, but most of the time his delivery is pretty spot on. And I just kind of see it as his character. Like, that's just the way his character talks now. At first it was a little, not necessarily jarring, but it was obvious. Now it's like, okay, no, this is the way he talks. It's normalized, I guess, if you will. So I do enjoy his portrayal.
It's really impressive.
But yeah, Indara says they got the results back from the council, and they said, no, they're not allowed to take the kids. It's not really the right thing to do. And then Torbin kind of gaslights her. He's talking about, hey, but the COVID, he jumps in, he piles on. Again, he's fulfilling his own self-interest here and wishes. Think about what's going on in his head. Think about what he just went through with Mother Anastasia. But he's like, no, the coven are dangerous. They had black eyes, and he had black eyes. I mean, clearly this is not the right people to be with. He's basically fueling Sol's instincts here. He tells Indara that she can feel that they're not safe, right? So at this point, Torbin asks if they can go home now. He's like, can we leave now since we know that they're the virgins or whatever? She says no. He turns around, he sulks when he walks away. And then Sol steps up and says, like, I want to talk. Let me talk to the council, kind of thing. Which, again, very Qui-Gon, maybe even Maverick, if you want to go that far, of him to step up and do so. But he's got a lot of conviction in the way he delivers that. Like, it's very clear about what he wants. Like, this is the right, no one's listening to me, and this is really the right thing to do.
So was Indara wrong for shooting him down?
I think no. I think by the book. I don't know. I guess it depends on where she... In this time and era, I would say maybe yes. Like, you know, the High Republic has done a lot. There's been a lot of examples where Jedi have just gone and done what they felt like they needed to do. Like they were more in tune with the following the Force, the will of the Force. You know, I talked about every Jedi walks their own path. That is from Charles Soule. There's a story. There's lots of examples in the High Republic. But we also have to remember we're on the back end of the High Republic. And maybe this is where we're seeing that transition. They're moving away from, okay, let's not keep doing whatever our hearts desire because that's maybe they got in trouble during phase 3. And let's stick to the book. Let's go by follow the playbook. Let's listen and adhere the advice of the council. And if, you know, the Republic wants us to do something, that's probably okay too. I think we're probably seeing that transition and leaning more into that. So maybe in regards to the High Republic era as a whole, I would say probably not in tune with what we would expect, but given the time point, the little pinpoint in the timeline, maybe it does make sense for her to have pushback like that.
I ask because it seems like, I mean, Andara doesn't trust Soule to give maybe the full color of the situation that's going on too. He's heavily influencing it and potentially shaping the conversation of what he believes is real and not real. And would that come across to the council clearly in an articulated way that they would be able to make the best decision? I think Andara's probably doing what she feels is best to give a accurate assessment of what they actually know and what they do. So I actually kind of think she might be right in this situation, that she has someone who has that really extreme conviction about what he believes is right and wrong in the situation. But it's also, she can't necessarily trust him because his feelings are interfering with a lot of that.
Yeah.
And not necessarily and while it's at odds with her, I don't know that she's as dogmatic in that sense, but it's difficult for her to trust him and all that he's thinking clearly and actually would come to the right conclusions or the same conclusions that he would if he were disconnected from the situation in that kind of way. So I think she's just trying to keep it just to the facts, right? And we talked a little bit about this last week. You know, truth is colored, right? Facts are what things really are. And I think Andara is trying to deal as much with facts as she can, although there are things that don't add up and are making her uncomfortable. And that's where she's trying to get overall shape of guidance. And these kids are kind of throwing a wrinkle into some of that stuff, especially since, you know, Soule wants to go and adopt one of them or both of them at this point.
Right. Yeah, JW just chimed in and said it is kind of weird how much Andara did not want Soule contacting the Jedi, not to follow up about the results, or at the end, I kind of wonder if Andara withheld info. I think they're all guilty at the end of the day, right? I think they could all be implicated on what happened on Brenock. No one's clean. Right. So yeah, it is weird, but there we are.
And then we get the test results, which blows the top off of everything.
Yeah. They say high M counts. They didn't give us a number. I was waiting for the number. I was like, oh, is it going to be more than 20,000? They didn't give us the test results, but they did say the symbiotes are the same, which had come up before. I don't remember where the hell this came up. What was it, Master and Apprentice maybe? I don't remember.
Yeah, I think so.
Somewhere they talked about this not too long ago, but the way you look at it is it's kind of like almost like your DNA pattern, right? You overlap them, the DNA pattern of like your midichlorian count or force count or whatever the hell it is. But nonetheless, it's basically saying, look, they were probably the same person and they were split. Because even like Andara says, with twins,
you're not genetically the same, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You're not completely identical in all the ways, yeah.
But this, at least from the Force perspective, they definitely are, which is something that's unusual for the Jedi. Of course, we don't get any more explanation into that. I think that's fine. This is stuff that we get to talk about and speculate on for the next few years, which I think is going to be a lot of fun to talk about more here. But Soule does say only a virgins could have created that type of power. So this is kind of our confirmation that,
well, that's their assumption.
Well, from Soule's perspective, right? That's fair.
Right. And again, I think from Andara, what we were just talking about, I mean, he's leaped straight to that. He's made connections that don't necessarily exist, although it seems plausible, but he is asserted as fact at this point.
Yeah.
When it's not fact.
Yes. And that's enough to really, like, that did not do anything for Torbin's situation.
Oh, no, he lit the firecracker then. He's like, all right, we got to go. Let's go.
I don't know what he was thinking he was going to do.
I don't know either.
Right?
He's just going to go knock on the door and take the kids.
Or just run in and grab the kids. Who knows? But he's obviously not thinking straight. He's obviously, not rational in his thought. I chalk a lot of this up to just the madness, reeling from the madness of what happened with him and Anastasia. I think that's a pretty fair explanation. You don't need necessarily poke around too much in that to kind of get the proof there. But nonetheless, he jumps on a speeder bike, takes off. I think someone had mentioned too that I was surprised he didn't try to talk to Indara before jumping on the speeder bike and going off on his own. It's just it's a lot of bad decisions were made in this episode, and whether you like the explanations or not, I think they're there. This is probably one of those where the explanation's there, and he just made a bad call of judgment kind of thing.
It was rather abrupt. I mean, I think, and to be fair, from a viewer perspective, it was rather abrupt. Although I'm with you, I think there's enough reasoning behind it all that we can reason our way there and say, excuse me, we're trying to really condense all of this into a very short period of time for whatever reason we keep doing this.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. Like whether you like it or not, that's up for debate. But so they take off speeder bikes. I don't know. Some of the CGI here, special effects, are kind of weird.
It was really weak. Yeah.
And I went and changed. I saw it on my really nice television. I thought, well, maybe it's too nice. So then when I looked on my phone, it didn't really work. It's fine. I mean, trust me, Mando had problems like this. All the series have had issues. We've brought them up so many times.
Always speeder bikes too.
It is. And I don't know. Yeah, it's maybe because we didn't have the models and the practical effects that we had. Maybe just trying to do something that high speed, and it worked better when we had little model sets and rather than CG. But who knows? Lord, I don't know where hell I am in the show notes at this point.
Yeah, Torbin's taking off, and Soul's going to go after him.
Yeah. Right. Sure. They take off. So the girls, he takes off on the speeder bike. Kel and Indara get into the ship, and she says, we'll catch up with them a little bit later. And we get to the witch's fortress here again. So more flashback scenes, or I guess we, catch up scenes. Mae and Osha are fighting. Coral takes Mae off with her. She says, Mae, go take a walk kind of thing. Anastasia and Osha have that talk about leaving, that real nice, sweet moment there. And Anastasia says that she's going to go talk to the other sisters and whatever and check with them. Although I think we talked about whether or not she was really going to go do that. It sounds like she had already made her mind up, if you believe what she said at the very end.
But she still did, though. She went and talked to her counsel, right? Yeah,
she did, right. Good decisions were made on that side sometimes. And then Coral sends Mae to go stop Osha, which I thought, Coral's a bad person. I'm sorry. That's not good parenting. How do you're basically pitting your two children against each other, setting them up for that confrontation. But I think, well, okay. And I'm not defending her, I guess, so much as I'm probably, the explanation in my head is, look, she's already kind of the dark side character, if you will. She seems more in tune with the dark side. She probably knows the benefits of what it means to get Mae real fired up and really tap into that. It's probably a lesson of sorts here, unfortunately. I just think it's bad parenting, but what would you expect from somebody who's in tune with the dark side? So,
yeah, I mean, it's all about aggression and giving into it and making sure that you are as powerful, as strong as you possibly can. And that's what Coral seems to value, right? We've always touted her as the disciplinarian, the taskmaster, I think we may have called her. And again, this is just more par for the course of, if you want to protect what you have to be fierce about it, and you have to really go all in and not be afraid to use aggression and use the things that you're afraid of, and then give in to what we would equate that to the dark side, of course, and it makes you more powerful. I think that was the lesson she was trying to teach Mae, in that get mad, because that is going to fuel your power and fuel your ability to make a difference. And we see her when she goes and smashes the control panel to lock the door. We see her assert that power and that dominance and that leadership qualities, maybe not the ideal leadership qualities, but maybe what they feel like they want or need in this moment at the very least. But we see Mae start to assert that, of why they might be viewed as future leaders, I think, and with Coral and Anastasia, but maybe more Coral's guidance in this respect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. She does. I forget what she barked. She barked some orders like, no one goes in or out.
Yeah.
Like, okay. Right. Stepping up there. Way to go. But she says, the Jedi won't warn you before they attack. Good girl, get mad, right? Really just stoking the fires or the flames within her. And then we get Osha is upset because she wants to leave. They don't think that she should leave. And this is where Anastasia says that it's Osha's choice, right? She's talking to the council at this point. And they talk about, they're worried about the future over the wishes of their child. And she says, look, that we should consider what the child wants. this is exactly what the parent in every parent situation. There's no, okay, I'm not even getting to that. But sometimes some parents will start listening to the kids when you're like, no, don't listen to them. They don't know. They're kids. But I get it from this case. She says, you may be my mother, but you are also our leader. And she says, right now I choose mother, which I thought it was good. I enjoyed that. It does. She was pulling rank, if you will, but from a motherhood perspective. And I think it makes sense. Again, being the better, trying to be the better parent here and given to the wishes of what she wants. I still question again whether or not how many times in Star Wars we allow kids to make these decisions, right? And which result in the fate of the galaxy. But that's just what we do.
And perhaps another perspective on that is if Anastasia forces Osha to stay, what does that do for Osha? Osha's already acting out. She's already resisting. She's already fighting with her sister more. She's already starting to build resentment towards the coven. So is that something that Anastasia is trying to take into consideration too, that if I take this choice away from her, and I'm usually in agreement with you, by the way, 8-year-olds really don't know anything about anything. They may know what they want, but they don't really know what they need or how they should get there, right? So that's why they have parents to help them shape their future and shape their decision-making, hopefully in the right way. But I think this one, though, is a little interesting of she's worried about resentment and worried about, or at least how I try to read too much into it all, about what it would mean for the longevity of the coven. Would she end up leaving anyway? And I'm with you. You're sending her off with a bunch of strangers as 8-year-old doesn't really feel right either, but I could at least see why she might be entertaining that choice of saying, if I keep her here, does that have another detriment on our society as well, and on what it would mean for her as a future leader and what it might do to all of the coven as well? Does it rip it apart? Are there other things in consideration? Again, I don't know that would have really limited my perspective on that one. I probably would have kept her too, but it was I was just trying to think of reasons why she would be so open to it at the very least, given that a difficult decision for a mother to make, to be able to send your child away or let them make a choice that takes them away from you, is going to be difficult. Yeah.
How much I have this question, and we don't necessarily need to spend a lot of time here, but I have this question for Sunday, and it's about whether or not Anastasia sees Osha as a light side person, like more in tune with the light side and staying here. And it's kind of speaking to what you're talking about here, about whether or not it goes too much against what they're doing. They seem to be very steep in the dark side. They wield the dark side, if you will, or some variation of it. Maybe it's in the middle. We don't really exactly know. But given the character that we saw in episode 3 for Osha, the character that we see up until the most recent episode, last week's episode, she does feel more in tune with the light. And so, if it is as black and white as that, if you will, right? If these kids were born as one, split into two, you have one who's the dark side kid, one who's the light side kid. Star Wars has done this before. I can think of 2 examples in the Old Republic where they did this.
Yeah, the video game. Yeah,
the video game is a perfect example of that, right? You have one light side, one dark side, and she knows that this is just not going to work. Against her will, to keep her here in this kind of dark side environment, she needs to go with the light side, which is unfortunately the Jedi. As much as she hates that decision, it is really going to be the best thing for her because she knows that she's going to be successful and be able to thrive in that rather than sticking around here with all these, curmudgeons.
We'll talk about it Sunday, but I'm also wondering if Anastasia views it more as a balance between, so kind of like Coral and her relationship. They seem to have a bit of a balance between really disciplined and more caring and affectionate. And you can view that in a lot of different ways of one parent. It's very complementary, maybe is what I'm trying to say. And when you look at Mae and Osha, they excel in different things, right? And so sometimes you need that person who can be your military type of leader, while your other one needs to be more the diplomat, right? So you have complementary things, the yin and yang things, all of the things that go into the symbols that they wear on their, or the markings that they have on their head and things like that. There's a lot more depth to all of that and the symbolism within it. But we can talk about it more Sunday, but I think it might be somewhere in that mix too. It's important to have 2 in that respect and not just a single leader. Maybe they view them more directly in that way since they're sisters and there's a very unique set of circumstances that created their birth and all that.
Yeah. Alex asks, are there any other high M count numbers mentioned to compare the twins to besides Anakin's? Also, what are y'all's M's count? David says his M count is 3. I'm probably there. Maybe a solid 2.
I'm going to
But,
go 17 just because
no,
it's a good
shut up.
number.
Oh, okay. 7. Oh, 7. Oh, yeah.
17, not 17,000.
Okay.
Just
Yeah.
17.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't
I would
remember.
never presume to be that special.
I don't remember in Legends if it was kind of
I don't think
taboo to
they-
talk about midichlorians after all that came out. Remember?
Yeah, Phantom Menace was about the only one that actually put a number out there, and
Yeah.
that was about it.
It's interesting that Disney's kind of embraced it, and we've had so much discussion about
We
it.
certainly don't want to say the actual word, though.
Well, you say that on the Disney on the show trivia that came out today around, I don't think it was like 10 a.m. Central.
Yeah, on StarWars.com, right?
Yeah, they brought up M count, and they did
Yeah.
say that it's shorthand or whatever for midichlorian count. So it's like, oh,
Introduced in the Bad Batch, right?
yeah. So it's cool that they at least they're acknowledging that. Alex says this is 15. Betty says Coral's like a warrior. She protects what she has. Skywalker's Academy. Dale, I'll come back to your question about, or your comment here about the stabbing of when Saul did that when we get to that. So if I forget, please don't let me, because I want to bring that up here in just a bit. And once again, I have lost track of where the hell we are. Oh, okay. So this is we get this is a scene where, she says no one goes in or out. Coral tells the witches to arm themselves. They feel like they're under attack here with the Jedi coming in. And Torbin and Sol arrive. Torbin immediately says, oh my God, they got the girls locked inside, right? Because they can't get through the door. Right? Again, they're reading too much into this. The door can't be opened, so clearly they've locked themselves in. It's going to be a fatal kind of event here. The elevator's been disabled. He says, they hear you can't go. I think this is where Saul kind of uses the Force to kind of tap in and hears, we're stuck here now. And oh my gosh, all this anxiety is starting to really build up here. And Torbin says he needs his help. And Torbin's just like way too eager to help here. Like they both are trying to self-serve one another at this point.
Yep.
And Dora goes and says she's going to drop kill Naka, which I thought that'd be awesome to see it. Like, she puts a tape in. We hear some exciting music blasting over the speakers, and then he does this little jump there. What was that from? It was from another movie. But anyways, she says she's going to drop him over the fortress, and she really wants him to stop Torbin from starting a conflict. And I'm like, well, it's probably both, really. But I get why Torbin is prime suspect number one, since he took off on the speeder bike.
Right.
And then we get into Coral telling everybody to get ready for battle. This is where Anastasia is told the Jedi have breached the fortress again. Again, like you could have knocked the first time. Now it just looks like you're, breaking entry. You're just thugs at this point. And Anastasia, again, talking about the light side, she's like, hey, I don't want any violence here. She said that in episode 3. She continues to say it here. So definitely feels like she doesn't want this to escalate. But Coral says, look, I'll die before they take my Jedi children. And this is where we're going to Betty's comment here about Coral is like a warrior. She protects what she has. More catch-up stuff really quickly. We get the journal, where she burns it. It then drops and starts the fire. And now we know it's an electrical fire. Electrical fires can be pretty bad.
Right.
They can cause, I was looking into this because because if this is our explanation, we just got to have to accept it, I guess. I did read that they can cause explosions. You think about the generator down there. There's, I don't know.
Some fuel, some gas.
Gas. It's whatever. It's like, in the grand scheme of things, I'm not really like bent over or hurt that it had happened the way it did. I think, again, this is where I felt like, okay, that's it. I was hoping it would be more, but it's an electrical fire. Not as fancy. It's not really exciting. It's not, the Sith being there or some other third party that was causing this or setting it up, like, or, where our headcanon was. But at the end of the day, it's an electrical fire and it caused a lot of damage. And okay.
Right. And the lead being buried within all of that noise is that Mae instantly regretted setting Osha's book on fire. Her journal. Instantly. And that's where the panic is. She's trying to shake it out. She wasn't trying to get it out of her hands. She was trying to put the fire out, and then she dropped both of them. And that's what ignited everything. Right. So it was all accidental, right? The perspective was almost like a setup, so to speak, after the fact. But Mae didn't intend to do any of this stuff. She certainly intended to set it on fire, but did not really. I think she regretted that almost instantaneously. And you see it. The audio description does another good job of also telling you that she feels that way as well, if it's not coming across. But again, from Osha's perspective, you don't see any of that. You just have the pain, and you have all of a sudden you got a roaring fire outside of your door that you can't get out of, and you feel threatened. So again, I think that's also where the previous flashback does help give us a little bit of that that symmetry, I guess, if you want to call it that, or you see the other side of the mirror
Mm-hmm.
and understand what the other perspective was, because it is important to see both sides in this case, because you've got a transparent still door right in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes absolute sense. And if you've ever held a match for too long, the first thing you're like, you let it go. Now imagine holding a book on fire. Doesn't take long before that gets to your hand. You're like, ow.
It did
dropping that
ignite
thing.
rather quickly, but maybe they just use really flammable pages.
Yeah. A lot of oxygen
I
in
would
those pages.
not want to see their library.
Yep. All right, let's get to the confrontation. This is where Torbin and Soul finally make their way down there. Anasia and Coral both kind of show up. It looked like it was going to be a showdown, like immediately right out of the gate.
Right.
And Soul says that they're there with noble intentions. And I've seen a lot of feedback here, a lot of criticism about how Anasia didn't just come out and say, look, we've talked about it and we've agreed, or maybe I haven't talked, whatever it is. We've talked about it and I've agreed. We're going to let, Osha go with you. I've seen a lot of people say, why didn't she just lead in with that? Right. And she actually says, she starts to explain that they're going to let her go. And it's Saul who jumps in immediately and cuts her off and says, where did they come from? How were they created? And she's taken back by that. Like, how dare you kind of even ask that question? And That's when she fires back with, someday those noble intentions you all have will destroy the Jedi in the galaxy. So,
Hi, Qui-Gon and Anakin. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I like the callback. I mean, I like it that they're, she's kind of talking about it because it certainly makes sense. I don't know. I haven't really seen a lot of feedback on whether or not that was the right thing to do one way or the other. I liked it, honestly. But Torbin, tries to escalate the situation. I mean, he pulls his lightsaber out at that point because, again, he's so focused on...
finger, man.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Like, he pulls it out. It's like, all right, you draw your lightsaber. Good luck. It means go time at that point.
Yeah, you're prepared to kill, right?
Mm-hmm. This is where Mae runs out. She tells her mom that she started a fire, and Soul goes, Osha, because he's so hyper-focused on Osha. He doesn't even recognize that that's Mae just yet.
So along those lines,
later, he does.
Do you think that he actually can tell the difference between them readily? Do you think this was intentional to lead us to believe last episode where he's calling Mae Osha, or he's calling Osha Mae, or calling Mae Osha, there we go, on the ship because he can't tell them apart right away? Did it change your perspective on what because I think last week we had talked about, you feel like Soul had a moment of recognition, but why didn't he notice more? Do you think it's because maybe they're so alike that you can't necessarily discern them in the Force until you start to look at the subtleties? Do you think that anything was there, or do you think this was just his anxieties were super high and he's so focused on Osha and has the connection that everybody is Osha, whether it's Mae or Osha?
Yeah. I think given the symbiont explanation, I think I'm on board with, okay, if you're using the Force to kind of tell who's who, you're not going to win. Like they kind of ruled that out. I mean, I think they poke holes in that argument that we talked about last week.
Right.
I think in this moment, I think it's just pure emotion. I think it's pure blindness by what his will is, whether that's his own will of the Force, nobility, being the white knight of a trope of some sort. It's all of that. He sees a child run out and crying for help, and he thinks Osha. Like that's it. Later on, he realizes, holy crap, that's not even Osha after he kills her mom.
Right.
Yeah, but I don't think he's looking. I don't think he's checking the forehead, going, "Oh, yeah, okay, that's me." Kind of thing. Alex brought up my favorite line. I even have it in my notes here. I want to talk about that. Okay, let's see. She says, "Help me," and this is where Coral pulls out her staff. Torbin ignites his lightsaber. I'm like, oh my god, this is really escalating very quickly. And this is where Anastasia finally turns into this black smoke monster, which is a lost reference. I apologize. That's why my title says what Soul did. That's another lost reference. You said you liked the special effect. I thought it was amazing. The way she kind of went back and the visual effects. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they spent all their money on the budget for this, but it worked. I thought it looked really cool. And I was trying to think if we'd ever seen anything like that with the Dathomirian witches. I don't remember them like dissipating into smoke. I think Mother Talzin does it at the very end.
Yeah, Mother Talzin did something similar, but not quite like this, especially what she was doing with Mae, which I'm guessing was almost like a teleportation type of thing, or whisking her away to safety in some way.
Yeah. That was my read on it too. Of course, from Soul's perspective, she suddenly turned into this black smoke. Everything's escalating, and he looks over and sees her doing the same thing, and he's thinking, "Oh my God, this is it. They're killing her right now in front of my face."
Right.
I think she was trying to do it, but obviously to protect her in some way. And of course, that leads Soul to finally just pull out his lightsaber and kill Anastasia.
And again, this is where it's really important to know that Soul believes this is Osha, not Mae.
Right. Yes. Yeah. It's not until after this, she's dead that he realizes that, oh my God, that's not the right person.
Because if it was Mae, would he have done the same?
Yeah.
Would he have taken the same action?
I don't know.
There's probably an argument that he may not have, right?
I'd call it 80% that he would. There's probably a 20% in there for me that he would not have, but that's probably cynical. I do want to also call out, and I called this out on social media today, when Mae talks to Indara in that first episode, when she says, Indara says, "Jedi do not attack the unarmed." And she says, "Yes, you do." This is the moment she's talking about. She clearly saw Jedi, maybe not Indara, but she saw a Jedi kill an unarmed person and her mother, which I thought was nice that we finally got that little payoff there. And this is she in her last, and here's where I have a problem. I don't remember. We talked about this at the opening thoughts, or if it was right before we started the show. If you're Coral and you've got all this rage in you, and you just, she's been playing up this whole idea. The Jedi are coming for us. They're not going to tell us when they attack. I'm ready to go, ready to go, ready to go. And suddenly Soul, a Jedi, kills your wife in front of your child. I would have thought Coral would have immediately attacked, like unapologetically, just went ape crap all over both Saul and Torbin. But instead, if you look at her, she's just kind of standing there and she's just watching the whole thing go on. And of course, you said it was probably plot convenience, because now we get Anastasia being able to say, "I was going to let Osha go. It's what she wants. It's what she wants. She chose you." Very dramatic. I get it. It just felt out of character. And this is when I was talking at the very beginning, there were some things in here that just felt like this didn't work for me. It just felt like out of character. I don't see why Coral would have sat there, just waited. And then after all that happened, after she finally slumps over and, he looks over and realizes, oh my God, that's not even Osha, that's Mae. She then decides that she's going to go into like some honorable combat where she just suddenly has to like pull out her spear and ready to attack. I don't think that's in her character at all. The minute he stabbed her, I was like, holy crap, she's going to come at him with the fury at this point, just rageful, if you will, especially with the dark side in her like that.
Yeah, I anticipated the same thing. I think there was probably one look that she did have that it was despair and kind of desperation and some of that and maybe anger coming across, but maybe I'm remembering or reading too much into it. It was a lot of that for dramatic effect, of course, I think, but you're right. I think it does take you out of the character of Coral a little bit, that would have just been overwhelmed with grief and anger, and it would have just all come out, and it could have led to something really cool to see on screen. Like the visual aspect of that would have been super impressive and would have really escalated things early. They were also probably tapering that just a touch in order to put that more with the Jedi facing each other rather than her getting directly involved, I think, to that extent. But it also gave us a reason for Soul to start to recognize, though, when she goes after Soul and Soul's not fighting back, seeing what Soul, he's doing this is almost like almost like he's already into this mode of penance of like, I did this. I'm a horrible person. You're angry. I can't fight you because I've done something horribly wrong and I've made a mistake and I don't know what to do about it. So I'm just trying to ward off and just delay this until you get tired, but let you get all of your feelings out.
He had a very Elzar man moment there, where he killed somebody and didn't, regretted it and thought he was doing the right thing. And just, he was caught up in emotions and the anxiety of everything. So, again, if you're a High Republic fan, you know exactly who I'm talking about. You know exactly what I'm talking about with Elzar Man, but he was very, very similar in that regard. And nonetheless, she dies. Mae runs over, calls out, "Mama, Mama." She's crying. This is where Coral tells Mae to run. And this is where Torbin just goes into like full on, alpha mode here with blocking all the attacks coming in with his lightsaber. Saul was being just pummeled by Coral and not fighting back, like you mentioned. He takes 2 elbows right in the face.
Yeah.
And she knows. She tells him, "Fight me. Like, what is going on here? Why have you suddenly just stopped?" kind of thing. And you can see it all over his face. He's like, "No, I don't want to do this. I can't believe what I just did," kind of thing. He's absolutely in shock at this point of what had just happened. And then we get the big explosions, which kind of stop that whole battle. We see the Indara ship kind of fly over the top there, and we hear more explosions. Actually, we see the explosions first. This is one of the scenes that we had talked about that hadn't been played yet, where she kind of takes that big breath, and turns out it was the explosions that she was seeing happening up ahead here.
Right.
So finally cuts off the end of Coral's staff and tells Torbin that the twins are locked inside. Coral then bamfs, which is another. I was seeing a lot of people talking about that.
Yeah, Nightcrawler reference for
the
Nightcrawler
Nightcrawler
fans
reference
out there. Yeah.
And Torbin says it's happening again. So in that moment, he's suddenly feeling all the same thoughts, the feelings that he had when he was about to be his mind was about to be taken over. Like he could sense that, like all that anxiety that he had about it happening again was happening again. And then this is where Coral says, he says, I can't remember what he says. Torbin says,
mind is fortified.
Mind is fortified kind of thing. Like she's not getting in this time. And she says, you should not have brought him here. Torbin thinks he's talking about him. And this is where Alex called out that line. It's almost, if you listen to the way the line's delivered, she's like, not you, you dummy. Like it sounds like that's what she wants to say or does say. It's just the way that the line is delivered plus the accent that it comes across that way. But my God, I listened to that line like 3 or 4 times and just laugh every time when she says, not you. But yeah, this is when we got, now when I realized what was going on, all seriousness, I was like, oh my, this is where, we're going to finally get the big showdown, which we did. I like that they showed Kelnaka light the lightsaber, and you got to see just the green light on his face. You didn't actually see the lightsaber because they didn't have to show it.
Yeah, the wicked grin that goes on his face too.
Yeah, the wicked grin. His eyes were blackened as well. That was really great. And then we get into the coven, which is the coven. They're kind of like swaying back and forth. So you brought this up earlier. I just want to kind of mention how I rationalize it. I don't know if there's any truth in this. You mentioned about how they were. I think you said something about how
they possessed Kelnaka. Why didn't they give us how they would possess Kanaka when they possessed Torbin kind of one-on-one with the mother?
Yeah, and I saw it as it was just the power of many. Like all the women together was enough to kind of get into his head versus somebody like the Padawan, if you will.
Okay. Because we hadn't really seen that Kelnaka was upset about something. I
exactly.
think.
Yeah.
So that was the part that was like with Torbin, there was a weakness that they could exploit. We didn't necessarily see that with Kelnaka, so it didn't quite land the same way for me.
Yeah, and maybe they did. Maybe there was a moment there, because if you think about it, there is enough time that passes when she pulls the ship over.
Yeah,
and
she
just kind of parks it
several minutes before all of his grand reveal. So
right.
Yeah, we don't know where he got dropped off, but either there was a bit of a commute in traffic.
She dropped him off at the front gate, and he's like, crap, it's locked. I got to climb the side of the wall.
Right. Or they were working on him the entire time. That's entirely plausible too.
Right. Yep. And that's kind of, yeah, exactly. They may have been working on him. So they may have gone into his mind. If they didn't, then I think the short answer is, look, you got a lot of powerful women here with dark side magic, and together they were able to infiltrate his mind, as strong as he is, as stout as he may be, and were able to possess him. Yep. But the fight was awesome. I thought it was great. It was, I was curious to see what it would look like with a Wookiee fighting, just because they're so big and Jonas is so huge. He's so tall that I didn't know if some of those moves would look weird.
So athletic though, which
is
great.
Exactly. Yeah. It wasn't distracting for me. I could see at moments I don't know how to explain it. Like I like the fight, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but you could tell this was a very big person trying to do like what we see smaller people do, if you will. I don't know if that makes any sense whatsoever, but I thought it was a good fight set.
Yeah. So how do we explain some of this stuff maybe within the context of Star Wars? Is if he's being controlled by a group of witches, it's not necessarily the situation where they're going to have all of the skills and access to maybe draw entirely on the Force that Kelnaka would be able to do with all of the skills and the training that he's had. It's not like they imbue all of that and maybe get all of that up front. So some of the fighting was relatively straightforward, and again, trying to overwhelm, I think, the other Jedi. Maybe it was more of the approach there of you have a big Wookiee and clearly he could still use the Force, but maybe not all of his abilities are all at their disposal too.
Yeah. I already forgot what, Dale, what was I think you had mentioned it earlier about the stabbing. We can come back to it, of course, of Soul stabbing Anasia. But yeah, overall the fight was great. I enjoyed some of the scenes. I was hoping we'd get more of that kind of epic scene where, he's jumping up and it's in slow motion. Wait, I got to ask you. Sorry,
Yeah.
we had a lot of slow motion in the series, and I know years ago, and I mean years ago, you, myself, Mike, other people that have been on the show, we've kind of talked about what the parameters were for Star Wars, and we always said, okay, well, as Star Wars was then, we would never have
Bullet time.
What's that?
Yeah, bullet time.
We would never have like bullet time, yeah.
Oh.
Or I remember, I can't remember what show it was, or maybe it was just a conversation. But we threw things out there like that. We talked at that point. We were talking about rated R, which is we're not going to get into now, right? We talked about whether or not we would have subtitle or the names of planets, right? That was something that Star Wars never did, and suddenly we got it in Rogue One. There was just all kinds of things. Like there's a checklist of stuff that I think we used to think was kind of in the DNA of Star Wars, and you couldn't break that. I don't really necessarily. I think you and I have agreed at least and said, hey, it is what it is. And if they ever decide to do it, as long as they do it and it's effective and we like it, then go with it. This was a lot of use of slow motion, which is something George never really did. But I didn't mind it. Like, maybe I've evolved and maybe I'm just, getting older, whatever it is. I enjoyed it. Pop music, I know that just came up as well.
We'll talk about that at the end. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about that at the end.
Yep.
I like the song a lot. But yeah, so did you have a problem with the slow motion effects, I guess is my question here.
No, I think, does it fit the style of the story that you're being told? Right. I think that's the question, right? Does it fit within the context of what you're watching? If the answer is yes, then it doesn't matter what you do. You can do different stylistic things. You can do different ways of directing, different ways of framing a scene and presenting characters and things like that. So I think that's the interesting part about what we've had with things like Visions too, right? Different approaches to storytelling, and it's okay to do these as long as they fit within it. If you're trying to do these slow motion scenes and it's in a comedy scene, that doesn't make sense, right? That's an extreme example, but I think on these it accentuates. I think it gives us a moment to actually relish the wire work and some of the things that they're doing with the stunts, to where otherwise they're just in a flash and everything is moving so quickly, and sometimes that kinetic energy is really important to capture. Like when Jackie was spinning around, you see the tails on her whatever the no, I keep wanting to call it a tarp, but what do you wear on your anyway?
Poncho?
Her Jedi outfit, but whatever the word is. But anyway, it's cool to see some of that flying around, right? But in these moments, in these moments, you don't necessarily, you want to be able to take the time to enjoy it, especially if you've got these wide shots where you can really see both characters, maybe all three in one frame. I think that's a lot of fun. I think this was a good use of it. It didn't take me out of it at all, and I was able to enjoy it more. So I think this was a good use of it, and you can do it as long as it fits the style of what you're wanting to present.
Yeah, I think people are crying right now. Honestly, they're really upset or worried because what does this mean for Star Wars? Are we going to suddenly get everything's in bullet time now? And I don't think they're going to go there. But to your point,
with the Acolyte, maybe we see it like more for if there's a second season, maybe you see more of it there. But are you going to go into the cartoons and see this type of thing? No, not likely, unless it's something super stylized that they're trying to get a point across.
Yeah.
But I don't think this is here to stay necessarily. But it's not necessarily something that won't be done again. I think it's always possible to do again. I think it could work just fine.
There's a moment in this too where Kylo Ren.
We got this in Rise of Skywalker too. Didn't we have slow motion in Rise of Skywalker or Last Jedi with Rey and Kylo fighting?
Yeah, but it was like I guess the difference was it was setting up the fight.
It was Last Jedi.
Yeah, it was Last Jedi
in the throne room.
In the throne room, right? Yeah. It starts slow motion and then it goes into full motion, and so people were like, "Oh my God, they used slow motion," and the argument was like, "Well, no, they didn't. It was just to set up the scene to kind of." Set the stage and get kind of perspective on the scene itself. And I don't know, it was a big debate at the time, but this is not that. They clearly used it a couple times in here to slow things down.
Right.
I don't really
get off track there.
No, you're fine. No, you're a good call. I couldn't remember if
tabard was the word I was looking for.
Oh, the tabard. Yes.
I was like, tabby cat. No. Tapioca. No, that doesn't work either. Yeah.
World of Warcraft player. I'm ashamed that you didn't have it.
I know, as a WoW player, I'm very ashamed. I couldn't pull that out of that out of the air.
There's a moment in here where Kylo Ren's theme plays again.
Yeah,
I don't know what to think.
Still don't know what to make of it.
Yeah, I don't either. Like, okay, now I'm like, well, maybe they're just using it because it sounds cool or whatever. But who knows? We'll probably get some explanation by the series is over. Yeah, I like the way he used he turned off when Soul was in the air. We got to see that scene play out where he turns off his lightsaber, hits him in the face with it, and then uses that to knock Kelnaka's lightsaber out of there, which just forced him to use his claws at that point. I think Black Chrysanthemum is one of the characters, that Wookiee, he uses claws. I forget the name. They call them out there. It's like taboo and forbidden for Wookiees to use their claws. And which is one of the reasons why Chrysanthemum was like, he's kind of a bad person already, but he was known to use them. And so that's why he was never really wanted or, acknowledged by the Wookiees, as you will. So
I think this is the one disappointing aspect of the fight, is that it wasn't really clear when Torbin got the cuts on his face. It wasn't after he got shoved and thrown over the table or whatever it was in the courtyard, because he got up and he was still clean. It was only after he had his face smashed in, but we look at the position of the hand, it doesn't necessarily make sense, and it's not really clear when it happened. And so it just seemed like it was all of a sudden there and he was bloodied. I think that was my only disappointment with the scene, is it wasn't obvious to me when he actually got the wound, except that he was just being grabbed by the face and shoved against the wall. But again, I didn't see any action that led me to believe that he got scratched.
When did Anakin get his? When
he got the scar on his eye?
Yeah.
I think that was in the
Clone Wars. Clone Wars?
That was in Clone Wars, not the Clone Wars, but I think Clone Wars, the cartoon. Yeah.
I couldn't remember that, honestly. I know. Take my card away.
Yeah. Well, that was like 2003, so you'd be forgiven. It's been 20 years.
21. Yeah. Anyways, so Kel is choking Soul, and this is where Indar jumps in and expels, I guess, the women. Like in the audio description, it says she kills them. So I was surprised. Like the first 2 times I watched this, I didn't use the audio descriptions. I just watched it and thought, okay, they passed out because they were exerting a lot of energy or whatever. And that's tragic because they got buried and everybody thought they were dead and they really weren't dead. But in the audio description, it does say that they did die. So I don't know how that works, but
in my head canon, Indara went into Kelnaka's dream-like sense and had her lightsaber out and started hacking and slashing.
Right.
So that's what happened.
Fighting them on their own turf kind of thing.
Well, I mean, yeah, you basically get in there and you have to do something. Now she's exerting force, or the force, on him there. So clearly I think it was supposed to suggest that there was some fight going on and she had to reassert herself against all of them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, how she actually went about doing it, I don't know. I think I joked on Discord, they just lost the will to live.
I missed that one. That's a good one. So, look, I'm already getting called out. You haven't watched Clone Wars since 2000? No, I haven't. I think
Dale. I brought this up to Mike the other day too. I was like, I've been talking. I think I mentioned this to you maybe a year ago. I want to go back and do a Clone Wars rewatch and reevaluation of all those episodes because I think they hold up pretty well. But anyway, the story for another day.
I'll go do my my penance here and go watch it after this. Did Indara know she killed them? That's a good question.
So. I think she did.
She probably did.
Now,
I imagine
along those lines, though, we get the repeat of the scene where Osha is below. She hears the rocks and she hears the screams, and that happens well before this scene happens. Where was it the screams just because of the rocks and the explosion?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so there's no relation whatsoever to what Indara does, which we don't see any screams.
Nope.
Versus what Osha hears when there's the explosion or whatever above her. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't cover it. I don't think I have it in the show notes, but we talked about that in one of the Patreon episodes about what that was, and we said, oh, there's something else going on, right? They all screamed at once, kind of thing, and it was really just now when you play those scenes together, at least in this episode, they were startled by the explosion that went off. So from Osha's perspective, she's so far down there, it doesn't sound as loud, and all she sees is the rubble hit the ground, and through the light that's coming through the vent there or whatever, the drain. But yeah, that's all it was. It was not them all dying at once as we're kind of theorizing or suspecting.
Right. Yeah.
Let's see, where are we here? So the witches all fall over. They're all dead, and Indara tells Soul to go get the twins. He runs inside. He has to try to save both of them. They're both stranded on the walkway. The
impossible choice. Yeah.
Well, and This is where I have another question about the decision. Like, why wouldn't he have tried to save both of the kids rather than the Bridges? Like, if he's holding up Bridges, why wouldn't he just try to hold up the kids? And all I can say in that one, and I'm not really that strong on this one as far as like, oh, I didn't really like that. Maybe just in the moment, that's what he did. And, you know, again, another bad decision was made, or in the heat of the moment, that was what the best he could come up to. He was just traumatized by killing somebody he shouldn't have, so he wasn't thinking clearly. You can make a lot of excuses or come up with reasons, however you want to look at it, as to why he didn't do that. But I think it's a fair question to ask.
It just rolled up on a scene where everything is collapsing and everybody's going to die.
Yeah.
You just kind of reach out and grab the biggest thing you can, right? And you try to hang on, and clearly straining to be able to do this too. So it's really putting his will and his power to the test. So
right.
I'm willing to give a lot of flexibility there. If you roll up on a scene, you just do the first thing that happens, your instinct to go out there, and I'd probably the same type of thing, right? I mean, yeah, you're trying to save the kid, but if you can keep the whole structure up so the kid doesn't slide or fall off,
yeah,
you keep the whole structure up, right? So they can hang on to the handrail. I'll try to lift the rest of it. I don't know, something like that. Because there were handrails.
There were handrails.
Use them.
I know. Well, and to be fair, like, again, narratively, you're missing the point. Like, if you're focusing on whether or not,
right,
it's a gripe for me.
It's circumstantial at that point, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And
the choice is still the same.
The choice right? was really what you should be focusing on. The takeaway here is he had to make a choice, and a Jedi chose one living being over another living being because of his own, call it selfish reasons, right?
Emotional
attachments that he had. Yeah, that's what that scene was about. And hopefully you're walking away. You can, once you're able to kind of, get through all the other minor stuff, you realize that's really what that scene was about. Cause that's kind of a big deal if you think about it, right? Him and having to choose. And then him saying later, I saw her die, when he's talking, recollecting about what had happened. He's like, I watched her die because I made her die. I had to.
Well, he later qualified it though. No one could have survived that fall. Right. So he didn't see her fall, but he put two and two together that it was a very long drop. She fell. No one could have survived it. Albert, how did she survive it?
Well, the only theory I have left to go back to,
I'm guessing coral. Yeah.
Well, maybe coral. I didn't think about that. That's a good one. But I threw that theory about there, how they really couldn't be killed. Right. I think way back when I said, you can't kill one without the other because they're a dyad or whatever you want to chalk it up to be, a divergence in the Force. Mm-hmm. And so maybe she dies or she technically dies and suddenly is sent to the Bunta tree, because that's where, I don't know, maybe they were birthed there. Or maybe that tree's the freaking virgins. I don't know. But we didn't talk about it. But maybe that's kind of like she gets teleported there and that's why we see her at the very end of the episode at the tree, because it feels weird that she would show up there. I think you and I talked about it. She probably showed up there because that's kind of where they would go to meet. And so she was expecting to maybe find Osha there, but maybe that's where she ended up after she died.
If only we had a metal detector to test the Bunta tree.
That's the only way to find Stop. You sound like the people I've been fighting with all day.
Zerallen's in the chat, believes Mother Coral. Seeing what we saw with what Mother Anastasia was trying to do with Mae, mm-hmm. and trying to do the similar disappearing act or teleportation, I don't even know what to call it. I have a feeling that Coral was probably watching out for the situation and may have intervened and done something to save her and move her to the right place rather than have to explain anything else. I think at that point, I think I like the idea though. I think either one could work, that there's something special. We'd have to explain some of that, of how that was possible, especially if either one of them die, we'd have that opportunity to do that, but then they'd have to stay dead. I think in that regard. And I got to be honest, I'd be surprised if both of them made it out of the series at this point. But right now, I think my money's with Zerallen's and Mother Coral here, that she influenced that one in some way.
One Up says the moons, they're in the logo, they're witches. Could be it.
Yeah.
Well, I don't.
One Up's on Team Coral then, I guess.
If Coral saved her and didn't die, then the odds of her being behind some of this or being the master, I don't like the idea, but they go up, I think, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, there's a lot of influence there that we'd have to talk through, and I'm sure we'll do that on the Patreon episode as well. Betty Mez in the chat is saying May use the shadow force like her mother, is what they believe,
to kind of stop her fall. Or
yeah. I guess the only, maybe to be devil's advocate on that one, because I'm kind of, I like the idea that something with the shadow stuff happened, but does she know how to do it? It seems like she's maybe not familiar with how that was, and Anastasia was doing it to her in the past. But again, stressful situations. Maybe this is like, it's like being a mutant. This is our second X-Men reference of the night. Is like a mutant. Stressful situations kick things into high gear, and that's when you're able to finally do something, right? So.
Yeah. Well, he nonetheless, he makes a choice. He saves Osha. They get back to the ship, and we get kind of the aftermath here. Torbin apologizes, and Dara says she warned both of them not to interfere. Again, she's talking to them almost like children. Like, I told you both.
Mom's mad. Yeah.
Mom's really mad. Sol says he wanted them just to be safe. He said he had to make a choice. They kind of get into a little tussle there, where emotions start flaring, which is all I've seen people go, they wouldn't do that. I'm like, no, they would. They're human. It's how they resolve that, right? They reconcile those emotions. You can see it on their faces, and they kind of both go, okay, this is not who we need to be or who we are. We clearly see that.
Right.
And then we get, they're talking about the truth. Saul wants to tell the truth, right? He wants to go to the council. He wants to tell them what's going on here. And then Adara decides that they're not going to do that. A part of me thinks, I think most of this is coming from protecting Osha, but there is a part of me that wonders if she is protecting Sol as well, and her own butt in some regard. How much do you think that's playing into all this?
I don't think she's thinking about her own defense here. Sol might be a small part of it. I'm with you. I think it's probably mostly Osha. I think she's very genuine in that moment when she points at her and says, this little girl has basically lost everything today. And now you're going to take her dream. You're going to take the only person who she has a connection with, or someone that she feels comfortable with at this point. And again, my comments at the start of the show was, what would the Jedi do with her? They put her in an orphanage or try to place her with a family, or she's not going to be trained at the temple, right? Council said no. They presumably wouldn't change their mind. Of course, clearly we know they do, but what would they do? And that uncertainty is driving. It's just more of this fear, right? Of we've done this to this person. Now we have to start making concessions just to be able to protect them and try to do right by them in some way. But two wrongs don't make a right. Continuing to make wrong decisions don't necessarily do that. You still come forward and you say, here's what happened. Here's what we think we should do. Yeah, I get you don't trust my judgment anymore, but still, we have the experience here of what's going on. We think this is best, and whatever that might be, you need to let it play out from there.
Yeah. Well, it was certainly a 180. I wasn't expecting that, and it certainly
it was a 180. Yeah.
Yeah. For all these characters, like I'm walking away, by the way, Osha wakes up, she asks what happened. Sol's basically looks over to her, and Dara kind of nods like, do it, dude, just tell her. And so he says, hey, your sister started a fire. He lies to her, and then the show kind of ends there, of course. But walking away from this episode, I was really, at the very beginning of the series, especially after episode 3, I suspected that there were some things that went wrong. It was really hard for me to wrap my head around somebody like Saul would do something like this, right? But I think given where it is, like, it doesn't necessarily, he made some wrong decisions, but it's not like it was as egregious as I was worrying or fearing it was going to be. Like, you can see why he had the motive to do it. You can see why all of these events led him to some of these decisions, and even if they're wrong, it wasn't like a necessarily I'm going to do something evil kind of thing. And so for that, I think his character does save face. Again, made bad decisions. Don't get me wrong, 100% bad decisions, several of them, many of them. But it doesn't necessarily taint the Jedi Order, like we said at the very top of the show. I think there still are the good people. The intent, we always go back to the intent when we talk about what Jedi do versus what the Sith do. What was the intent of this? And I think that is still pointing to the light. But any thoughts, I guess, on, Indara's lies and Saul's lies there at the very end?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself whether or not you feel like you understand why they were making the decisions they were doing, whether you agree with them or not. Do you feel like you at least understand that the for lack of a better word, the human element and the human desire to try to do right, even though we might say things that are not truthful or they're not accurate or they're bending the truth a little bit. Did Mae start a fire? Yes, technically she did start a fire. But did she do all of the other things that led to the complete destruction of it? No, the Jedi had a huge part in some of that stuff too, right? So, but do you understand the motivations? Do you understand where they were coming from? And I'm with you. The Jedi weren't an evil organization here, or a set of evil intent, or trying to steal the kids or anything like that. Sure, they were driven by certain motivations and desires and emotional attachment, but at the same time, and those are against the Jedi way, and we could argue they weren't behaving in the best way possible. But at the same time, do you understand that why they would be making some of these decisions and why they would go about some of this? And did the show do a good enough job to be able to get you there? I think, and then if you want to have a debate around some of that stuff, I think that's perfectly reasonable of being able to do. Having a little more time for the show to breathe in that type of context probably would have helped a little bit more with some of the criticism that we're seeing. But I think they did a good enough job to where if you just take it at face value, you get there, right? They showed you what you needed to see to be able to understand it within the amount of time that they had to tell it. And it really does feel like they're in time blocks here, by the way. Like, it really does feel like we're restrained on how many minutes we can have a show on the series for some reason. It seems to be repeating itself, I think, what we've seen all season long. So I'm a little curious about if we will get 50 minutes for the finale, because I got to be honest, it kind of feels like we won't, but we'll see. But anyway, I think that's really what you have to ask yourself is, do you believe that the Jedi were, at least their intent was always good? Do you feel like you could at least understand where they were coming from?
Yeah. Betty asked, do you really think for one child, they have to keep the truth to the High Council? That's, again, I think that's what Jonesy's saying. And I think I said it earlier. Like,
I think it's a small thing, right? I mean,
yeah, I just don't know that. Again, it is what it is. They made the decision. Whether it was the right decision is absolutely up for debate. Like, I think it is absolutely up the right. Like, I don't agree with the decision. I think they should have told the council for this reason. Like, why would you hold this back? Why Saul was clearly saying, we need to do the right thing here. I'm going to tell him what's going on. So you did have somebody in the order saying this isn't right. But then you have somebody like Andara who is probably thinking with her emotions now, right? She made a bad decision as well. She should have never decided to keep this from the council and never convinced Torbin and Kelnaka and Saul to keep this from the council. Yet they all agreed that they would. So again, they all made bad decisions, unfortunately. And I don't think it was the right decisions at all.
Right.
But, it is what it is. And so like again, in the chat right now, Zorella says truth from a certain point of view. Betty's agreeing. Yeah, this is all certain point of view stuff.
Is really bending our perspective on point of view, right? And a great many of the truths that we lean on rely entirely on your point of view, right? From Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I think we're definitely seeing that of each one of their motivations. You can understand why they would believe in what they believed in, and why they would make the decisions. It doesn't mean you have to agree with them. It doesn't mean you have to like them. You don't have to believe that they're right either. They might very well be wrong, but you at least understand someone's motivations. Same with Anakin, right? His desire intent was never to do harm and do evil, but like I think Betty Mez was saying, corruption starts with a little arrangement of the truth. Corruption starts with giving away, sacrificing little pieces of yourself in order to meet kind of your emotional desires, emotional needs, your emotional attachments, and very dangerous when you have a lot of power like these characters do.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot to discuss on Sunday on the Patreon show. There's a lot of questions that are still out there. We are definitely going to get into our hopes and dreams for the finale and what we hope to see explored, talked about, discussed, and if not, what we'll theorize and maybe for a potential season 2. But yeah, there's so much to discuss from this, honestly, and all the other stuff that's going on in the present that's probably going to be another long Patreon episode. So, but I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a good, fun conversation to be had.
Yeah, my hopes and dreams are that everyone will come out and join us on a live stream, Albert, and want to recognize all these amazing people that were out in the chat tonight. Steph, Alex, Sky, JW, One Up versus CPU, Danny K, Zoralans, Music Train, Ippolito, Betty Mez, Skywalker's Academy, David Rogers, Zoralans. If I missed anyone, sincerely apologize. Great conversation tonight. Thank you for all the amazing chat. You guys are awesome. Way to be positive, way to be constructive with the debate and the conversation. We certainly appreciate that. CantinaCast.com/YouTube. If you'd like to come out and join us, we would love to have you. It's free for everybody. And if you're curious about Patreon, CantinaCast.com/Patreon. Again, Sunday nights, we usually come back and we do a Q&A and do a little deeper dive on the episode, a little bit of speculation what the finale is. And then, of course, after all this is done, we're going to have a field day with kind of a look back on it and kind of an assessment of the series as well. So some fun stuff coming up that we usually do once the series wraps up. So you're going to get more Acolyte coverage here for the next few weeks.
Also, don't forget, if you're a Patreon member, we are going to do a From a Certain Point of View episode. Typically, we do like our top 3 moments of the series or whatever. And so depending on, what tier you're in, we'll send out the invite and the feelers for that. But we're looking forward to doing that show with you guys and have you guys on, be part of the show, and really just talk about all the great moments and all the honorable mentions that we're going to have.
And if you're not a Patreon member yet, and the person knows who I'm talking to that reached out to us, you're going to want to jump in quickly if you want to try to jump on that show, because that's going to happen here really, really soon. So take a look at it. Let us know what you think.
Yep. All right, guys, we'll leave it there, and we'll see you all on Sunday for the Way Station as well as the Patreon show. So see you guys very soon.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.